All right.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Hiram. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So we will be starting our official stuff right now. So I will be disconnecting my webcam because I'm using a bigger monitor. So I hope you all don't mind, right? Thanks. All right. Just hold on now. Okay, everyone, can you see my screen?
All good, Jayson.
All right, fantastic. Guys, let's start, all right? Okay, first of all, our today's session will be slightly different compared to what other instructors did in the past. So what we plan to do from our side is we're going to share with you a lot of experience, a lot of practical part, that you really can consider in your research activities, all right? To make the long story short, is basically more hands-on type, all right? So I believe that majority of the participants came from the undergraduate program. So I will try to relate, to your level so that you can understand the research process better. Because many of the undergraduate students, when it comes to this research program, right, or research courses, initially they will feel phobia, because they have never been exposed to this kind of courses. And when they start the final year project or research project, then they encounter a lot of difficulty within the process. But today, our job here is to give you all the tips and tricks that you can use for your research activities. Most importantly, you don't feel phobia about research, because research itself is a very interesting course, because you are actually finding answer to your curiosity and also the question that you have in mind. All right. So the first part of our today's discussion would be introductions of research. All right. So before we go further, what is research? Whenever I ask this question to many of the participants, regardless students from my class or those participants from my workshop, usually they will think that research is something very complicated. It must come with a lot of evidence, a lot of statistics to support the entire process. I do agree with you if you have this kind of mentality or understanding about research. But just before we go further, try not to complicate the word research itself. Technically speaking, when you ask a layman about the meaning of research, it is just basically came from the word re and search. Technically speaking, we are doing a searching for information. That is the process of research. That is a combination of these two key terms, all right? So, like for example, if you want to buy the phone, right? Let's say Apple is going to introduce iPhone 13, maybe few months down the road. So technically speaking, before you buy this phone, you will definitely do a lot of market survey. You will read a lot about the products. You will go to the physical store if they have the prototype for you to play with. At least you can make comparison with other devices. So from there, you will start to do a so-called rigorous and systematic inquiry, whereby you start to observe how big is the capacity of the phone, for instance, in terms of the memory, in terms of the camera performance, or in terms of the battery. This is how you're going to make comparison across the option that you have. Okay, technically speaking, maybe you will compare the iPhone 13 with Huawei or with other competitive brand. So without you realizing it, in fact, you already started this so-called systematic inquiry in your mind. So later on, you will make a discovery. Discovery in the sense that you will make decisions whether would you buy that particular products or vice versa. So you see, the entire process itself is a research. But many of us, we don't realize it. We thought that research must be something complicated. Eventually, it is not. It is just part of the process that we went through as a human every day. Even though, for example, you are thinking of what to have for your lunch, is basically research, because you are asking yourself, what do you want? Maybe you want a curry rice, or maybe you want chicken rice, or etc., etc. You see, you are thinking, you are actually questioning yourself. That is also part of the research process in our life. All right. So to make the long story short, basically research in an organized and systematic way of finding answers to questions. Like I said earlier, research is basically respond to the question that we have in mind. And most importantly, our curiosity. Okay, we don't do something people already done in the past, or we just replicate it. For research itself, it would be interesting if, let's say, we can challenge it something new, something that we are curious about. So if, let's say, you have the curiosity on why people behave in certain way during this COVID-19 pandemic, so if you want to know further, then you will read more about it, then you will understand them. So in the process itself, you will learn. So this is what we mean by research. At least you will gain something at the end of the day, and you will clear the doubt that you have in your mind. All right. So when it comes to research, there are a few keywords that we need to take note. Number one, it would be systematic. Okay, systematic in the sense that when you look at academic research, right? When you look at the thesis itself, or some of the institution, we call it dissertation. You will, when you look at the entire process, it has to be systematic. So that is the reason why you have the first chapter, your second chapter, third, so long and so forth. So the first chapter usually will be the introduction itself. Chapter 2 will be a literature review. Chapter 3 will be the methodology. Fourth, analysis. Fifth, maybe the discussion and conclusion. But some of the institutions, you may have more chapters, doesn't matter. But the core of the research is all there within all these chapters. All right. So research itself also must be in organized way. Definitely, you will need to have your proper methodology, how you execute it. There must be a structure. So for instance, when you talk about collecting your data using a survey questionnaire, the next question you need to ask yourself, who would be your sample and how are you going to approach them? All right. How big the sample size is going to be? And what kind of question that you want to ask? And all these questions, you must have the answer for it. Without answer for this question, definitely you will allow others to question your research preparation. So this is something that we need to take note. That is why I say research must be well planned and organized. So with the objective that you are actually creating a shield from people to attack you or to question the weakness of your research. All right. So next would be finding answer. Like what I shared earlier, research is always finding answers to the question that we have or the curiosity that we have in mind. So as far as researchers are concerned, most of us definitely we want, our result to be significant, to be supported. We want all our hypotheses that develop, right? All is significant. But we have to take note of one thing. Research is like an exploration kind of approach. If you want everything to be what you expected, that is no point for you to conduct the research. So that is the reason why, if let's say your hypothesis is not supported, it doesn't matter. You just need to report as it is and justify your case accordingly. I need to highlight this simply because many of the researchers, when they found out that the result are not significant, what they did is they would do something unethical. For instance, they will, they will massage the data, they will manipulate it just to make the finding to be significant. But please take note of one thing: many of the good journals now, the reputable journals that publish in a good with the good publishers, as well as some of the examiner, they in fact will ask for your data set. So don't try or never think of manipulation, simply because you never know. If let's say the examiner asks data from you, he or she found out that you actually manipulate the data, then it will land you in trouble. So this is something that we really need to take note. Okay. So the next would be question. Like what I said earlier, research question is basically the center of the research. We were never we were not able to come up with any new idea if we don't have a good research question. So research question is basically something that want to challenge the status quo that we have in the body of knowledge. So from there, we can see our area of our discipline expand or improve accordingly with the new finding that we found in our study. All right. So these are all the key elements that we really need to take note when we are embarking in our research activities. All right. So this is basically the definition of research. It's a scientific process that validates and refines existing knowledge and generate new knowledge as well. So as far as we are concerned, for those who are in undergraduate, we never expect you to come up with something very, very new. All right. You do not need to think or bother of creating a new theory, because creating all these things, it requires a lot of times, commitment, and a lot of evidence to prove your work. So what we actually expect from an undergraduate student would be something, the basic part of doing research, how you find answer to your research question. Most importantly, we want you to appreciate the research activity so that you can use it in your future career. You won't be surprised, right? Many of the employers nowadays, before the hiring, right, they usually will prompt a candidate with quite numbers of questions. And one of it is they will ask the candidate whether do you know how to do simple research for them. Because organization itself, when you look at it, they also want to improve internally. So therefore, they also expect that the workers are able to come out or to do a simple research that can help the organization to perform better. So this is, whether we like it or not, research skill is a must nowadays. So therefore, we actually need to appreciate and understand how it works so that we can use it for our future career later on, right? So these are all the characteristics of good research. So we have the research itself must be clearly defined. You must have a detailed research process. It must be well planned, high ethical standard, must have the adequate analysis. The presentation must be clear, straightforward. The conclusion must be justified, limitation must be addressed, and also the credentials of the researcher. No worries, I will go into one by one. All right, first thing first, clearly defined purpose. As far as research concerns, right, we must have the objective and the purpose to do it. So without this, we have no direction in our study. So many of the researchers, when they embark on a certain research, they already know what is the direction and what they expect to achieve at the end of the day. So when you look at all the research activity, right, when you begin at the first chapter, there would be a process that they need to go through until the end. So when it comes to the end itself, the last chapter itself, it will reflect the particular researcher answered all the research question and objective that has been developed earlier. So technically speaking, you see the purpose itself must be addressed at the end of the day. So without a good purpose of research, right, you will never you were not able to put forward the aims of your study. So without this, people might not see the value of your research. So that is the reason why when you plan a certain research or you propose a certain kind of study, you must know what would be the implication and also the contribution. This is very important because it highlights, the originality of your study. Okay, so the second part would be detailed research process. Like I said earlier, when it comes to research activities, there are no shortcut for it. Okay, you must go through all the processes. If you start with the chapter 1, you will have to go through the second, third, fourth, and last chapter. So all this particular process is basically helping you to strengthen your entire presentation of your research work. All right, so there is no shortcut for it. You must address every single part of the chapter within your thesis. And you have to remember any changes within any chapters of your thesis, right? It will affect others as well. So technically speaking, all these chapters are interrelated. So you have to take note, plan it carefully before you write your thesis, okay? The next one would be thoroughly planned design. Like I said earlier, when it comes to the methodology aspect, you need to plan it. You must know how you're going to execute it. Don't jump into certain area that you don't have a directions. I still remember many years ago, I have a friend of mine. She was from UPM. During that particular time, she started an area of research. She embarked in an area of research related to economics. Whatever she proposed that time is something very impressive. you won't be surprised during her time as a, just merely a PhD student, whatever she presented, in fact, attracted the attention of the Ministry of Finance. And this ministry sent the officer to her proposal defense and to simply because just to understand what she intend to do. Because she is formulating a new policy that can actually shape the directions of the government, not only Malaysia, but for the Southeast Asian country. But what happened to her is the sample part, simply because the sample for her research must be someone who can make a decisions for the government. And when you look at the Malaysia context, the person who can make decisions for the financial aspect would be the finance minister. And during that time, finance minister is also our prime minister. But you have to understand when it comes to this ministership, right? They actually swear on the secrecy of, meaning to say that they are not able to reveal most of our national secret to you, okay, to my friend as well. So unfortunately, she had no choice. She's know that she's not able to get all this information. The worst case in the worst case happened to her is she need to put a reverse year on her research proposal, whereby she need to spend about 1.5 years just to revise the direction of the study. So what this tells us is, if you don't plan at the initial stage, you might encounter some difficulty later on. All right. So I do agree with you. Some of your supervisor might tell you that, okay, you must go through the process, and at the end of the day, you will find the light at the end of the tunnel. But my suggestion to you is this: even though we can go through the conventional process, but as a researcher yourself, you must be innovative and resourceful. Okay, and most importantly, you must predict or forecast what would be the worst case scenario, or you must prepare the contingency plan for it. So in this case, you must think who would be your sample and how you're going to approach them. What if you're not able to get them? So what would be the remedy? So these are the things that you need to clear before you jump into certain area without knowing anything. All right. So that is the reason why the whole entire research process must be well planned. Okay, must be well planned. At least you have your game plan with you, and this game plan itself will serve as a good blueprint for you to execute your research from beginning until the end. All right. Okay, next would be ethical standard. All right, this is something very subjective, but in our current situations, these things has been one of the most important elements for research. All right, when you look at the good journals now, in fact, they will ask you to submit the ethical forms. When you start your research, you must fill in a certain form from an institution. They want to see all this evidence. The purpose is because they want to ensure that the way you conduct research is ethical. Okay, they do not want you to create harm to the respondents or to the subject of investigation. So this is something that we really need to take note. Because why? Many of us, when we conduct a certain research, right, we would try to influence our respondents so that they can answer in the way that what we want, so that our, all our hypotheses that we projected are all supported. But unfortunately, you need to take note of this thing. If let's say you create this kind of influence on them, definitely you know that whatever you projected at the end of the day would not be reliable, simply because you already influence your respondent. So my question to you is, if you already influence your respondent, what would be the purpose for you to do the study? Why not you just fill in all the data and you just run it and you just come up with the analysis that you prefer, and you will get the result that you want, isn't it? So therefore, we really need to take note of this particular point. Okay, do not go against all these ethical practices, the negative as part of it. Okay, so the next one would be adequate analysis. When it comes to research itself, okay, we must make sure that all the validity and the reliability aspect of it are checked. Okay, we must make sure that our research is well executed, and most importantly, when it comes to our analysis, right, we must make sure that everything is reported. Okay, for those who are doing your thesis or your final year project, please take note of this thing. You must actually address all the necessary prerequisite requirements before you conduct a certain analysis. Many of us, when we do a certain analysis, we assume that the examiner already know. For instance, if you want to use regression test, it's a very common analysis, all right? Many of us, we just run the regression test just by it is, and we do not address all the preliminary requirement that required, okay? So for example, we did not address the normality test. We did not address the missing value. We did not address the outliers, but we straight away go to the regression test. And this is wrong. This is something that we need to observe. Okay, in your research or writing your thesis, you must treat your examiner like they know nothing about research and also analysis. So before you straight away go to your regression test, right, you must observe and report all these prerequisite requirements. All right. So you have to address, for example, the normality test. All these things must be reported first before you can jump to the regression test. So that is what I mean by adequate analysis. All these things must be reported accordingly without fail. Okay. The next thing would be unambiguous presentation. Of course, this is more to the way of writing. So definitely, we do expect you to write, in simple, straightforward, is good enough. Okay, we do not expect you to write like the Westerners, using the old type of English. No, we are not expecting that. But what we actually looking from the student would be something clear, straightforward, and it can represent the idea that he or she had in mind. That's all. All right. Okay, next would be conclusion must be justified. Okay, as a research student yourself, whatever written or whatever came from your mouth must be justified. So like I usually tell my student, there is no right or wrong in research as long as you can justify it. Okay, most importantly, when it comes to the word justification, is basically providing them with evidence. All right. For example, if let's say you want to go for convenience sampling, many of the students will say, I will use convenience sampling because it is convenient to me. If you answer in such a way, definitely you will land yourself in troubles. Okay. If let's say you want to go for convenience sampling, you must go with the proper justification. For example, you do not have a sampling frame. Then that is the reason why you go with convenience sampling. Don't worry about this. I will touch this one later on in the methodology section again. All right. So technically speaking, what I want to share with you is whatever you put forward, whatever technique that you want to use in your research, most importantly, you must justify it. Remember the word of justification. Okay. Next would be limitations. All the limitations must be addressed. Definitely, we know that simply because there is no perfect research in this world. Even the government, they themselves, when they do a census study on our population, if you look at, Department of Statistics Malaysia, they have been struggling, they begin their, if I'm not mistaken, the research began last 2 years, and until today, they still cannot complete the research simply because of this COVID-19 pandemic and also the reach out to the samples. What about us as an individual researcher? First thing first, we do not have a sufficient resources, time, and sometimes we also do not have the privilege to meet of some of the samples that we really want. So technically speaking, our research would definitely cannot run away from this so-called limitation. So whatever limitation that you have in your research, you just need to report it. All right. No one will tell you that your research is not good because you have a lot of limitation. But as a researcher yourself, you must try to control it, try to minimize it as much as you could. In other works, this is very common. It's basically copy and paraphrasing only. Okay, the issue of plagiarizing idea is also one of the important elements that you really need to take note. Okay, sometimes when you take certain idea from a certain paper, okay, you need to highlight it. Okay, you need to give, okay, you must cite the work and you must give credential to it. All right, next is falsifying and manipulation of the data. And this is something very common and something that we really need to take note. Okay, because I came across in a few examination process. In fact, I did ask the data set from my students. All right, so I do not want to share with you what happened right after that, but I just want to tell you at this moment of time, falsifying and manipulation data is something very, very serious when it comes to academic matter. All right. If you are being caught of the first point or the second point, the outcome would be in many of the institutions in Malaysia. Now I would say the outcome would be you will be terminated from the program. Okay. So this is a very serious offense when it comes to research. So don't do this. If let's say your result is not significant, just let it be. Doesn't matter. Just report as it is. Okay. But of course, if as a researcher yourself, you also can control it in the sense that if you are using survey questionnaire, please observe all the processes. So for example, you do the pre-testing, the pilot testing. I believe that all this technique will in fact help help the respondent to understand your question better. When they understand your question, definitely they will answer it in a better way, in the sense that since they already understand, so definitely they will not have any confusion, and this will definitely help you in getting a better result. So all these things must come from you as a researcher yourself. All right. Next would be presenting information is not true. Sometimes, I do agree, some of us, right, we like to come up with a very controversial kind of argument so that it can illustrate the strength of our research. Unfortunately, in the process of arguing our case, sometimes we tend to present certain information which is not true. This is very, very severe when it comes to presentation of idea in the work. All right. So for instance, if let's say you come up with a statement, for example, like this, Malaysia economy is not doing well. All right. You need to tell us which report or which source of information that you refer to. You cannot just simply come up with this kind of statement without any evidence. Definitely people will question it. Who are you to say so? All right. So if you want to come up with all these controversial statement or any bold statement, right, you must have the evidence to back you up. This is something that we really need to take note. Okay. The next one would be misleading respondent. All right. As much as we want our respondent to answer in the way that we prefer, please don't mislead them. Because many of us, before we pass the questionnaire to our respondent, right, we would try to influence them, so that they can answer favorably towards what we want. If you have this kind of practices in the past, please don't do it anymore, because you will know at the end of the day, you are not actually getting the authentic response from your respondent. And when you don't get this, it means that whatever you found at the end of the day, it doesn't sound right. Okay. So technically speaking, when research is a journey, we take it one step at a time. Most importantly, we appreciate the process. We enjoy the journey. Okay. So for those who appreciate and learn well when it comes to your research activities, so definitely you can go far. Some of us here, we can actually continue with our MBA and also PhD. So it's all basically about the foundation itself. Okay, to me, right, research is not about science. Research is basically the combinations between science and also art. You see, why I said so simply, because when it comes to your methodology and analysis, yes, no doubt, it's all scientific approach. But when it comes to your writing part, your argument, your discussion, all these are art. You know, writing is an art simply because the way I write and the way you write might be different. Because the differences that we have, it also will illustrate how we convince the reader. So that is why I say research is basically the combinations between art and also science. So it's a very interesting kind of process, you know, when you're really into it. Okay, I still remember many years ago, I only started to learn about research during my MBA program. Okay, so during that particular time, yeah, everything's so new to me. I don't even know what is research. I know during that time I'm struggle and I'm very stressed simply because I have zero knowledge about research. But I really spent a lot of times, you know, go through, you know, the multivariate textbook by Hare. I still remember some of the textbook like Saunders. These are all the good friend of mine. Every day I've been reading it. Then from there, I start to notice that research itself is basically about application. So if you know how it works behind the scene, you will learn the technique itself. The moment when you have that technique, you won't find research to be difficult anymore. So you will enjoy it. All right. So that is basically my little experience with research. All right. So we will start with the first part of our research. The first part is this, the chapter 1. Okay, we have this introduction, right? So when it comes to introductions or background of the study, there are a few things that you need to take note. All right. The first part would be the background. Okay, why we need to have this background? Okay, background itself is basically a section in your research to set the scene, you know, like a movie as well, you know, before we start with the, before we watch this movie called Avengers, okay, when we begin the movie, right, definitely, you know, you will see they start to introduce all the characters, who is Captain America, who is the Spider-Man, you know, what is their role, you know, then only we can follow the storyline. The same thing goes to research as well. Okay, before you straight away jump to the conclusion what you want to do and what you want to address, you must tell us what is going on. So this is what we mean by background of the study. It's just like a storyline. You are telling me a story. So this is the beginning part. Okay, so in this part, you also tell me what would be your research context. Okay, for example, if you're looking at hospitality, you know, you're talking about hotels industry. So you have to tell me what is going on so far and how big is the contributions, you know, to our Malaysia's GDP or economic, and how it actually can influence consumer behavior or others. It all depends on how you argue it, but at least you give me exposure, what you are intend to do at the first place. All right. This is also the section that help you to highlight what would be the gap that you want to address. Okay, gap here means that what you want to challenge. Because when it comes to research, right, basically we have to take note of two things. Number one would be your theoretical contribution. Number two would be your practical contributions. But in the background of the study, you do not need to be very detailed. What you need to do is just touch and go. You just highlight a certain idea to me would do. So technically speaking, when I go through your background study, when I already know what you intend to do. But the detailed part of your gap or something that you want to challenge, you can put it in your problem statement later. So don't worry about that. Okay, so that is how it actually works, you know, when it comes to this background of the study. Technically speaking, you are just telling me what's going on and what you intend to do for your research. Just the introductions, okay? So the next part would be problem statement. Okay, when it comes to problem statement, this is the selling point of your research. This is very, very important. And many of your supervisors or many of the reviewers, this is something that they observe or assess, you know, or assess before they decide whether your research is up to the requirement or not. Okay, I believe that many of you will tell me, Cham, this is the most difficult part. Even though I read a lot, but I still cannot come up with a good problem statement. Okay, don't worry. this is part of the research process, because many of us, even though we are myself and also Dr. Hiram, we are researchers, we also need to read a lot and just to need to find a problem that worth to address. So problem statement is something very interesting, simply because if you can question a certain scenario that required further investigation, definitely it will help you to come out with a certain contribution that eventually at the end of the day you can contribute to the body of knowledge. So what is basically a research problem? Research problem is basically a situation or circumstance that requires a solution to be described, explained, or predicted. Technically speaking, it is an unsatisfactory situation that you want to confront. Meaning to say that when you observe a certain scenario, you know that something haven't been done or something lacking. Just because of your unsatisfactory perception towards that scenario, you want to do something to address it. So that is what we mean by a research problem. You are actually want to address those limitations that you notice within the body of knowledge. So from there itself, you will bring you to a gap. Knowledge gap is basically what you intend to address. Okay, problem statement is very general, but when you focus on a certain scenario, certain scenario in detail, this is what we call as a research gap. All right. So for example, what would be the research gap? Could be, for example, something less discussed, describe or explain. For example, if let's say you just for example, for learning purpose, okay, you read a lot about marketing literature. Okay, you found out that the corporate image supposed to have a significant influence on the satisfaction of the customer. Corporate image influence customer satisfaction. That is based on your reading. Okay, but the more you read, you found out that there's a limited evidence when it comes to empirical research or even literatures that are available. So when you don't find a lot of information, all right, so this is something that we very can explore if you have that kind of curiosity that you want to address. But most importantly, you must refer back to the literature, okay? Because literature itself is the foundation of everything. Okay, without that, you have no justification, you have no platform for you to argue your case. All right, don't worry, I'm going to highlight a few examples to you so that you can relate to what I see better. Okay, the next would be inconclusive. Inconclusive in the sense that some of the findings that you read, related to certain relationship between construct, for example, right? You see, some of the study, they only prove it in the Western platform, Western country, but unfortunately, when they applies to the Asian side, right, it's not work out. So maybe, therefore, the result is not conclusive, meaning that it cannot be replicated to various settings. So if you have that kind of scenario, perhaps you can actually question it and you can actually conduct further investigation to understand the scenario better. So the same thing goes to inconsistent as well. For example, you are looking back at the relationship between corporate image and satisfaction. If let's say you go through the past research, that have been conducted, you went through 100 journals articles, 50 of them say significant. Another 50 of them mention is not significant. Technically speaking, when you look at the statistic itself, it's 50% versus 50%. This show you that there is an inconsistency of finding between the relationship. So with the inconsistency in mind, you can actually propose, okay, to have a study to confirm the finding. So this is what you can do, based on your reading of the past literature. So that is why when it comes to problem statement development, right, you cannot run away from reading. You must always read. The most importantly, you have to refer back to the past journal publication, because this is always the directions of our research. All right. So next one would be no study. And this is a very favorite kind of magical word that used by students. When they want to do something, right, they will claim in their problem statement that there is no study being conducted in this area before. Please don't do that. Because if you use the word no study, right, in fact, you actually trigger the examiner to be more rigid. If let's say you say no study, you know what the examiner will do? They will eventually go to the databases or they go to the journals articles databases, right? They will try to look for evidence. Okay, if let's say you say no study being conducted before, but they found one paper that already published and that is the evidence for it, then how are you going to defend yourself? All right, so don't use this word no study. It is very, very dangerous because it will really put you in a situation that you are not able to defend yourself. All right, I believe that some of you, try your very best. You already review a lot of literature, but you still cannot find the evidence, for the gap that you challenge. Some of you will have this kind of scenario. You will tell me, Cham, I already read a lot. I already go to the databases. I try to exhaust everything, but unfortunately, I still cannot find the evidence. My question here to you is this, Cham, can I use the word no study? My answer to you is yes, but you must use it in a diplomatic way. Okay. For example, if let's say you want to go with the idea of no study, right? You must change the word. For example, like you're using this kind of statement, to the best knowledge of the researcher, there are limited studies. You see, to your best knowledge, to your best knowledge as a researcher, there are limited studies. Meaning to say that to your best knowledge, you only found a little or none that related to the area. So that is why you conduct a certain the study on it. It's just a matter of how you put the statement. Instead of you're telling me no study being conducted before. So the moment you say no study, I tell you what, if I were your examiner, I will be super critical with you. I remember this 2 years back, if I'm not mistaken, I attended one of the external proposal defense as a panel. All right, this PhD student presented his work. All right, and he mentions to us that there are no studies being conducted in the area that he actually looked into, and whatever he proposed, particularly when it comes to research model, is something new. You know what happened or not? One of the examiner already read the work thoroughly and prepare with all the evidence. So this examiner just stopped the student. He said, why not let me show you something? So this particular examiner just stand up from his seat and walk straight away to the computer, where the student presented his work, right? So he just plugged his thumb drive into the computer and show the student. Then the student also get shocked, because on one hand you are telling us that there's no study conducted before, but on the other hand, the examiner show you whatever he had described are already being published in the past. So technically speaking, yes, the situation is very awkward, and the outcome from the proposal in defense is basically fail and have to reattempt again. So that is what it could be when you come up with certain statement without justification. If let's say you really cannot find any evidence to what you are doing right now, the way you argue it, like for example, what I shared with you earlier, you can use a very diplomatic sentence to protect yourself. Okay, to the best knowledge of the researcher, there are virtually none. For example, that kind of statement, there are virtually none. Why you use the word virtually none is because you go to all these databases, right, in the internet, but you couldn't find any evidence. And that is how it works. So it's just a matter of justification, wording, and you come out with the statement that can actually protect you. Don't straight away jump to the conclusion that there is none. So this is something that we really need to take note, okay? Okay, what can be a research problem? Okay, research problem is basically, it can be under these areas. First thing first, It can be the areas that you want to improve as a researcher. For example, many years ago, I started my PhD in the area of medical tourism. I still remember during that time, there are limited evidence available, okay, when it comes to this area. And many of my friends told me that, Cham, it's no point for you to go to this area, because you will have difficulty in getting literatures, evidence to support your case. Not only one friend, but many of them keep on telling me the same thing. They ask me, why not you change to other context or other area, then it would be more easier. But to me, things very simple. Now, when it comes to research, right, it's not about replicating other works. To me, I want to know what is actually happening in the industry, because medical tourism itself, for those who don't understand medical tourism, is basically the medical tourists are those people, they are international tourists. They flew into Malaysia for medical purpose, and at the same time, they are enjoying our tourism services. All right, as long as they fulfill these two criteria, then they are medical tourists. So this is the industry that I'm talking about, medical tourism. In fact, in 2019, this industry contributed about 1 billion to our country. This is how big it is when it comes to this industry. So that's the reason why I want to explore and understand the industry better. So even though I have been influenced by all these people, telling me not to do it, but I'm persistent. I don't give up. I pursue on it. Yeah, because I know at the end of the day, I will get something new. I will learn something from it. That is about research, because research is responding to our curiosity, like I shared with you before, right? So that is what I intend to do. So I pursue, and I talk to a lot of stakeholders. Besides, looking at the theoretical point of view, I also deal with a lot of practical part. I went to hospital, talked to their CEO, talked to all these, marketing divisions. In fact, for example, like after completed my study, in fact, I recommended a few strategies for all these hospitals, and they use it. So since then until today, also I follow up with them, and they told me that all the technique that I proposed earlier is really working for them, especially in attracting, new customers to their hospital, and at the same time they are more visible compared to the neighboring countries, like for example Singapore and also Thailand. These two countries are our main competitors when it comes to this industry. So this is what I intend to do. That is how I come up with my research problem at the initial stage. All right. The second area would be existing issue an organization need to address. When you look at this, in this argument, is basically you are coming out with a certain research that address the practical part. Okay, but unfortunately, whether you like it or not, when we do academic research, right, you cannot just focus solely on the industry aspect, because if you only focus on the practical part, it will make your research like an action research. Action research is basically addressing the problem of the industry. But for academic research, besides addressing the practical part or the industry problem, you must also have a contribution in terms of the theoretical aspect. When I say theoretical aspect, means that what can you contribute in terms of knowledge in our existing literature. So this is something that we need to take note. All right. The third one would be theoretical or conceptual issue that you want to understand. Okay. So of course, sometimes when you read certain theory or you read certain concept, based on the past articles, you will find out that there are some missing link here and there. All right. Or some deficiency in terms of the research. Then you start to pick it up and you start to challenge it. The moment when you challenge it, that is how you can come out with a problem statement. All right. In fact, there are quite numbers of my paper actually come up from this theoretical and also conceptual issue. But all this is not from my reading, it's basically came from my curiosity. Okay, I will share with you one of it later on. Okay, the next one would be a research question, a basic researcher want to answer empirically. Technically speaking, when you come up with a certain question that you have in mind, and None of the study really look at it in empirically. So definitely you can actually jump into it and do it, okay, through observations or through data collections. And this will definitely help you when it comes to projecting your works later on. All right. Okay, just for the while, I will share something with you. Okay, I hope that you can see my screen here. Right, so when you look at this particular paper, I tell you what, I came out with this paper, right? It's like many years ago, and I still remember if I'm not mistaken, 2 months after my PhD registration, I came across this idea is basically based on my curiosity. I'm not from this knowledge management system success area. No, this is definitely not my area. It only happens when I want to open a bank saving account in Sungai Long, a place nearby to my campus. So when I went to this Maybank, when my turn's being called up, to meet the the teller. So I told him that I want to open a saving account. So what this person, the officer, told me that he couldn't do it right now during that particular moment of time, simply because their system was down. So he asked me to come back the day after, or maybe next week, because during that particular time is on Thursday. Okay, so I have no choice, then have to return on the next Monday. But before I left the counter, I did ask him, why this thing can happen. Can't you do it manually for me by giving me a form to fill in first? Then later on, when the system back online, you help me to key it accordingly. This is the suggestion that I give to him. He responded to me, he mentioned, sir, I cannot do it for you because every single applications or every single banking activities must be performed online. So if the system is not online, we cannot proceed our work. Technically speaking, we need to close this branch, okay, until the system resume online. This is the issue that they encounter. All right. Then I asked them again, what is this system? Out of curiosity, right? Then I asked again, what is this system? So he told me that this system that the Maybank have is basically linked directly to their headquarters, as well as the Central Bank of Malaysia, Bank Simpanan Negara. So they're linked to the central bank. So all the decision making will be based on the system. Simply because if let's say they have your IC, right, your identity card number, and also your identity card, when they put in the system, it can show them everything in terms of your family trees and also the credit performance of your family members as well. So that is how important the system to the bank's officer. So for all the bank officer, before they started their daily routines, right, they need to log into this system before they can perform their job. So that is how I actually checked with him, just simply because I'm very curious about the system. So what happened to me right after this is like when on the way driving home, it keep on pop in my mind is, what is this system? I keep on asking, what is this system? I'm very curious. So what I did is when I reach home, then I Google about it. I Google, I read, I download a lot of journal articles just to understand the nature of this system. And finally, it came to the context or the terms for this system is known as knowledge management system. Why it called knowledge management system? Because all the details of the clients, all the detail about the customers are stored in this system, and bank officer will use all this information in helping them to execute their job. So that is how I understand that the system itself is known as knowledge management system. Then I read a lot, I download journals, articles, I Google it. Then I just want to know what is the factors that actually, make this system to be successful. I just want to just want to get some idea how it basically works. That from the past study, right? From the past studies, this is the theory, theory. This is what I learned. Okay, in the past study, they mentioned that the success of the knowledge management system is basically depends on two things. Number one is your intention to use. Number two is your satisfaction. Technically speaking, if for the system to be successful in banks, right, the bank officer must have the intention to use, and also they must be satisfied with the system. That is how it can influence the success of the system. That is what argue in the literature. Okay, but it creates a curiosity in me, in the sense that when I look at this model, I know that something is not right over here. Why I say something is not right? Because I look at this one, intention to use. You see, when I talked to the bank officer earlier, right, I did ask him, can you do it manually? He told me that cannot. They have been forced to use the system. Technically speaking, when we go back to the definition of intention to use, or you go to the dictionary, okay, to read the definition of intention. Intention is basically, to put in a layman terms, it's like if you want to use it, you use it. If you don't want to use it, doesn't matter. That is what we mean by intention. Intention is only happen when you use it on the voluntary basis. But unfortunately, in the case of this bank officer, do they have the choice not to use the system or not? The answer is no. They have no choice. In fact, they are obligated to use the system. Technically speaking, when you look at the past theory, this is what I mean by past theory, something is not right. This is wrong. Because for the bank officer, they have no choice. They must use the system. So that is the reason why in my paper itself, I challenge it. Okay. So for instance, I can highlight it to you just for sharing purpose. This is what I mean here. And when you can follow my argument here, you see, with regards to the model on the success of KMS, the past studies have looked into the success in relation to user satisfaction and their intention to use the system. Like what I said earlier, the success of the system is decided by the user satisfaction and also their intention to use. And you see, according to Lucas and Dillon and McLean, right, the intention to use should only be considered as predictor of KMS success when the adoption of the system is on voluntary basis. Meaning to say that if you want to use, you use it. If you don't use, it doesn't matter. Okay, but you see, this is how I justify my case. Remember, research is always about justification. Now I give you the evidence. You see, when KMS user, means that KMS user in this case would be the bank officer, right, are made compulsory to utilize the system. You see or not, they have been forced. If you still remember, right, the bank officer, they have no choice. They must use the system. The moment they go to their office, they must log into their system first. That is how they execute their job. I read the statement again. When KMS users are made compulsory to utilize the system as part of their job requirements, user intention to use is no longer appropriate. Technically speaking, I'm telling you this thing is wrong. Intention to use is definitely cannot be considered as one of the predictor to determine the success of the knowledge management system. That is how I challenge a theoretical aspect, simply because based on the curiosity I have during my my service experience with the bank. All right. So what I argue that at the end of the paper, the intention to use should be dropped. So you see, no more intention to use. I only stick to only one, user satisfaction. So when you look at the past model, right, they have two, isn't it, intention to use here. So I'm telling you that this thing is wrong. So that is how this paper is accepted. My question here is this: am I really doing something extravaganza when it comes to research? I don't. I tell you simply, honestly, I'm not. What I did is basically question, certain things that I experienced in my life based on the curiosity. So from there itself, actually, I came out with this paper. So what I'm trying to share with all of us here is basically research itself. It actually the idea itself it comes from your curiosity. So the moment you have all this curiosity, please work on it. Once you're curious about something, go back and read a lot about it. Then you will easily find the gap that you want to address. Okay, so that is how we come out with problem statement. This is one of the easiest way for us to find. All right. For myself, in terms of personality, I love to do shopping. But most of the time when I went for shopping, right, it's just merely a window shopping. I love to observe things around me. Okay, simply because when you go to shopping, right, you can observe how consumer behave. Sometimes when they buy, their shirts, when there is a discount, so you can see the quantity they purchase. And I also like to observe how the shop being designed, the boutique itself. Okay, if let's say they use for example, the orange kind of light, or the colorful light, how it actually can influence consumers purchase decisions, whether would they stay there for quite some times, or they will leave the shop right after they pick up their choice. So this is something that I love to do, but just simply because now we are in the COVID situations, I hardly go to a shopping mall nowadays. Yeah. All right, so this is what I want to share with you, basically based on the theoretical and conceptual issue. Of course, there are many examples that we have here. And with Dr. Hiram also, we wrote quite numbers of papers based on the theoretical part. Okay, maybe I just share another one with you so that you can relate to what we are actually doing. Okay, maybe this is one of the papers just would like to share with you. This is basically the whole entire picture. The idea is to create a new measurement scale. All right. So the idea came across is when I try, because I'm in this area, when I read a lot about destination image, how people perceive Malaysia, okay, as a medical tourism destination. When I go to all the past literatures, I noticed that most of the way they measure it, right, is basically using the general destination image scale. So what I mean by general destination image scale is they are using a conventional one. Technically speaking, they are asking about, what do you think about the scenery of Malaysia, the food, the transportation? All these things are very common. But when you look at medical tourism versus conventional tourism, the attribute itself are already different. For the reason that when you look at medical tourism, the word medical is already there, So technically speaking, when the medical word is already there, the attribute itself will be definitely different compared to what we have with the conventional tourism. So I question that the conventional tourism, the way we measure the destination image should not or are not appropriate to address medical tourism. So that is why we argue that a new measurement scale must be developed to only focus or cater exclusively for medical tourists. That is how we came out with this paper. Of course, creating a new measurement scale is not easy. We need to go through a lot of process. For example, we do a qualitative approach at the first place, okay, through focus group and interview, just to generate the pool of idea. Later on, we will do a lot of this pre-testing and pilot testing to finalize our measurement. And then we do the statistical analysis through exploratory and confirmatory factor analysis. Then only then we come out with a new measurement scale. Okay, so at the end of the day, when you later on we will share this with you, don't worry. So you can, when you look at, for example, this one. Okay, when you look at the question that we developed for this destination image, right? So all these questions here are very focused only towards medical tourism. And this paper itself is the first paper in medical tourism that looked at how medical tourism destination image being operationalized. All the questions are very related to healthcare. Okay, for example, Malaysia has a positive reputation as a medical tourism destination. Number two, Malaysia provide opportunity for the medical tourists to combine medical tourism with vacation. You see, all these questions are very specific to the niche of medical tourism. Instead of many of the past paper, they are actually using the general tourism or conventional tourism, which does not actually reflect the overall perceptions of, overall understanding of medical tourism as a whole. So technically speaking, this could be also under this particular context called theoretical and also conceptual issue. This is how you actually can come up with your research problem. So this is basically the summary on how your problem can be, research problem can be identified. First thing first, it will be back to the idea, topic itself. So from a topic, you will know your subject area. Then from your subject area, you try to identify the research issue. Okay, it could be a concern, a problem, or something needs a solution. All right, like my case, if you still remember or not, this is the part where I visited the bank. So during my, the past conversation with the bank officer, I noticed that there is the problem. The problem is with the system. If let's say the system is down, then the whole bank have to stop its operation. And the bank officer must also oblige to use the system. That is the research issue that initially I had in my mind. So later on, what I did is I go back to the evidence from the past studies. I read a lot about it. I download a lot of journal articles, try to question the doubt. Then I found, right, the past diagram that I showed you earlier, the intention to use and also satisfaction, right? Then we question. I start to question the intention part. So this is what I mean as a deficiency in the evidence. All right. So technically speaking, we have to ask ourselves this question. Okay, what is missing for the case itself, right? Is the context of this intention. It shouldn't be there because when they look at a bank officer, they have no choice. So therefore, the intention must be dropped. Okay, what do we need to know more about? This is the part where the gap is found. So this is how I argue on that case. So what I noticed that since after the paper being published, I remember that the authority of the field, the KMS founder, he in fact published another paper and he acknowledged that whatever I found, particularly related to the intention part, should be is not applicable to all the setting. He acknowledged that in his paper. That is what make me happy the most. At least whatever I criticized earlier, it has been acknowledged by the authority in the field. So that is what we actually looking for. And there are so many evidence out there. When you look at Dr. Hiram, he also have quite numbers of very impactful papers, particularly related to Sarawak. Yeah, that is something that, it came from our curiosity, our close observation, and all these elements itself can be our research topic and research issue. And right after that, if let's say you manage to question the deficiency in the evidence of past study, then your next job would be looking for the remedies. This is the part whereby you really need to come up with your writings, do your research, and at the end of the day, you must highlight how your study can in fact contribute, okay, to the body of knowledge on one hand, and on the other hand, it can help the practitioner or even the policymaker in crafting their strategies to make the industry or the country to be competitive in the global context. So this is how we go through, the process of identifying a good research problem. It sounds complicated, but if you understand how it works, if you read a lot, usually the problem statement will be in your first chapter of the journal article. So you try to go with a good published journal article, then you will learn a lot. So the moment you understand how the technique work, right, eventually you will know how to argue your case later on when it comes to your thesis or dissertation in some of the institution. All right. So what would be the implications of the good problem statement? First thing first, if you have a very good problem statement, it will definitely set out a blueprint for the direction of your research. Like I said earlier, problem statement is basically your selling point. Okay, when you already highlighted all this issue, definitely you know that your contribution for your study will be based on all these issues that you identified. So with that, definitely it will guide you throughout your writing process. Okay, a good problem statement, when you look at the second point itself, a good problem statement will give you a good aim, for example, your research objective, right? To help you to come out with all the research questions and also objective for your study. Research is basically like a human, you know, when you have problem in mind, okay, definitely you will come up with a research question, or you will have question in your mind, then you will find solution to it. So finding solution is basically your research objective. Okay. All right, that is how it works. So technically, it will help you to build your solid theoretical framework, type of data, and also right data for your analysis. Once you have the problem statement, then we will have your research question. So this is the part that you just highlight, you know, the question that you have in mind. So it's quite simple and straightforward, whereby all these statements will be end up with a question mark. So this is the example how it looks like. For example, is there any relationship between brand image and service quality? You know, question mark, something that you want to address. Okay. So the rest is just for your reading purpose. The next one would be a research objective. All right. So research objective is basically what we can expect to achieve from a project. All right. So usually it will be in a sentence. So like you know, the first one we mentioned in our research question, right? That end with a question mark here is like to tell the reader what you're going to do. For example, to examine the relationship between brand image and service quality. You know, that's basically you're telling them the action that you're going to take forward. And the next one would be significance of the study. This is quite straightforward, whereby you will highlight two important parts. The first one would be the theoretical aspect, how your study can contribute to it. The second part would be the practical part. So these are the things that you need to have in the significance of your study. So this is basically your chapter 1. All right. So Dr. Hiram, you got anything to add before we move on?
Yes, thank you, Jayson. I believe your presentation is really, really clear. Even though this workshop is mainly focusing on chapter 3, methodology, but I believe what he presented is really, really important. If you don't get the scenery correct, if you don't have the appropriate research problem, research statements, if your research questions and objectives are wrongly formulated, there is no point to look at your chapter 3, your methodology anymore. So I hope that all of you out there, I believe most of you are undergraduate students, but some of you might be doing your postgraduate studies at the moment. All that has been said is applicable to all of us. For undergraduate students, we don't expect you to come up with a research to make a big contribution. Of course, as Dr. Jayson mentioned earlier, you still have to justify what your research is about, why your research problems, your research statements are formulated in a certain way. You cannot run away from the scientific process of the research. It is at the same time an art to write, to justify why you do things in a certain way. However, I'm not sure if there's any supervisor out there. As far as I'm concerned, for undergraduate students, this is a time when you learn the skills, the right research skills to do things. So even though your thesis may not be able to make any major impact on the society, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You don't have to save the world. You don't even have to save Malaysia from COVID-19. Put aside all this, we're not going to win a Nobel Prize with our research. Pay more attention to how you learn in the process, the skills of setting the scenery, the skills of writing a scholarly work to justify what your research problem, what your research questions are. So again, all that has been said is important for us to learn. If you think research is just like another assignment where you can get things done overnight, then you will be very, very sorry. Okay, you will be in a miserable state. It is not like any assignment where you can do things overnight. Your, some people, they can only work because of deadlines. It's better you plan early. I am in total agreement with Dr. Jayson when he talked about how you read journal articles and how you talk to practitioners, how you observe things in your daily, even your daily routine. And from there, you become curious, you ask questions. The issue may be small, but the gap, the contribution can be very significant. On one hand, you need to identify what the issue are. On the other hand, you need skills to justify, to elaborate. We don't have to use bombastic words to show that we are an authority on this particular topic. I read an article some days ago, English in its elegance, plain English, simple English is the most elegant one, basically, what it says. So think about the process, think about what you want to do, and utilize the process to learn the skills. Some people ask, which chapter is the most difficult chapter? Of course, research problem, that particular section is important. And therefore, we can say it is very difficult because you have to get it correct. Now, some people say the most important section is actually introduction. If you treat your research like a storybook, like a journey, it's always difficult to set the scene correct. Well, you should know what the scenery is, but you have to sleep on it, develop your skills over time. And when you go back to your work, your previous work, you should be the best critic of your own work. If you see something today more than what you saw last week, regardless how much it is, for me, that is already a significant improvement. So I know my words here have little to do to writing. I just want to encourage all of you out there, start early, do something consistently. Don't treat your research as a task where you need to get it done one day. Obviously, getting it done is very important. Pay more attention to the process. This is where you learn the skills, where you can justify things better, where you can observe things better, you can put into words, you won't lose your own voice, and there will be theoretical and practical implications in your work. Now, before I pass over to Jayson, I just want to show you a few things. I will just use the whiteboard, so it will be easier for you to follow. Okay, I hope you see my whiteboard. Now, like I said, we want to focus on research methodology, but let me just say this. For undergraduate students out there, or if you are postgraduate students, maybe you have not started or you are just about to begin your research journey. Now, whatever you do, to put in the layman term, it has to be something interesting to you. Okay, if it does not interest you, you only do it for the sake of getting it done to do your master's or PhD, you will lose your momentum. You will lose your motivation. When now let me say this. It is a journey, and this journey never promises easy, smooth sailing. But if it is something interesting to you, I believe you will embrace all the challenges. So it must be something interesting to you. It must be something that excites you. In particular, it could be something that you know. It could be something relevant to your experience, your working experience, your hobbies, things like that. Even though research is more about contribution of knowledge, contribution to knowledge, the context of the study plays a significant role to make your research interesting. And if you do something that you do something that you have had experience, you actually know the context better than your examiners, than your reviewers. Again, that does not mean that you would graduate, you would get the things done. No, okay. However, in terms of context, you know certain things better than the others. That will keep you going. You would maintain your momentum. That will motivate you to do more and more. I have students in the past. They are from various organizations, government agencies, companies. So when they do their MBA, DBA, or their undergraduate research, one thing I would tell them, do something related to your interests, something that you know about, something related to your working experience, because they must have realized something is not right, like what Dr. Jayson said earlier. Okay, I will not want to elaborate too much. This is number one. Number two, let me just say something appropriate. Now, I know appropriate is a very, very generic term, because what I try to say here is, if possible, okay, you may not want to do something related to this. I'm not saying that you cannot. If you are in this particular field where the topic that you're interested in is something controversial, by all means, okay, this is what motivates you, this is what excites you, this is why you want to do your master and PhD in the first place, then by all means, go ahead. For undergraduate student, you are limited by time. If you do your research for 5 years, 10 years, you can do whatever you want. But you have to finish your work in 1 semester. You have to finish your work in 2 semesters. Think about time constraint. Or you want to finish your master's in 2 years because you are under scholarship. If that is the case, maybe you want to do something more appropriate. And what I mean is, avoid doing something controversial, avoid something sensitive, avoid something seasonal. Okay, again, I hope I made myself clear. It doesn't mean you cannot do this. But for undergraduate students, you are time bound. Do something, not only do something that excites you, do something that helps you to learn the skills. Don't do something to save Sarawak. Don't do something to save planet. Do something that excites you, number one. Number two, do something so that you can focus more on learning the skills rather than addressing unnecessary questions because of the nature of the topic or the research. Let me give you one example. Again, this is just an example. It doesn't mean it is relevant to you. A few years ago, when Malaysia was about to have another election, a friend of mine did a study on GST. Okay. I told her, I did not predict, I did not forecast. Okay. This is not my interest at all. But I just told her out of politeness because she is my friend. Do you really want to do this topic? What if the government of the day, you know, the party, so to speak, they lose? And we know one of the manifesto by the opposition was to abolish GST. Okay, she told me she thought about this before. If this happened, she already had Plan B in store. Okay, instead of looking at GST, all the literature that she looked into, they could be applicable in another type of tax. So, all right, that's wonderful. And we know what happened. The rest is history. So she's still doing her PhD, but she managed to switch from GST to another form of tax. All right, so this is just an example, something seasonal, okay, something that may change. For some of my undergraduate students, they wanted to do something on post-pandemic. I told them, yes, you can, but while you are proposing topic on post-pandemic today, you must realize you will only collect data 5 months later for undergraduate students. 6 months later, what would happen then? We have no clue. We have no idea because of, again, the situation revolving COVID-19 at the moment. Okay, so I hope you get the point. I'm not telling you what you must do, what you must not do. If you are doing something that is bound by time, try to do something more appropriate. Okay, again, number one, something that interests you. Number two, something that is less vulnerable to situation. That is less vulnerable to situation. Even though you do something appropriate, of course, we are living in the world which is full of uncertainty. Who knows? Your supervisor decides to move to another country, and then your research is hung in the balance. So of course, there are many things that we cannot predict, but make sure you do something that is more appropriate. And what I mean is something that you can utilize your skills, something that you can learn your skills immediately. If you do something that requires 3 months to only read and understand, you have to think twice whether you want to do it. Okay, because when you are still searching for the right articles, your peers, your colleagues, your students might have already started formulating their research questions because they already have the articles in hand. You are still struggling. Should I go this? Should I do that? So something for you to consider. Number three, this is basically what Dr. Jayson has covered. Okay, so you may want to include consider all this, whether your research is something feasible. The respondents that you are going to approach. Okay, one time a master student presented a study, and in her study she needed to interview bank managers. And in her presentation, she mentioned that she would interview 150 bank managers. Now, we have no doubt that the study is wonderful. The topic is great. The proposed significance, this is something that you write. If you are able to write well, then of course, the language is wonderful. Your argument is persuasive. However, in terms of feasibility, we question her. How would you get hold of bank managers? Do you know who bank managers are? Do you know the situations when you approach them? We are not living in an ideal world when we send an email to a bank manager, but the bank manager is so happy with your research. He believes that this is his opportunity to contribute to research, and then he will make time. You will see him. He cancel all the appointment. He's there waiting for you, and then you can do your interview 1 hour without interruption. Dream on, huh? This will not happen. So you have to consider whether your research is feasible or not in terms of your sample, whether there's any budget involved. What about your time? One time, my undergraduate student, she told me she is interested in doing something related to OKU, okay, all the disabilities. And she wanted to make some contribution. She wanted to learn more about it. Again, I have no question about her intention. Wonderful. Okay, the interest, well, that is wonderful. However, I asked her, are you sure you want to do this? Because this is just an undergraduate project. You have to finish in two semesters. So why do you want to do it? How would you go about doing it? Then she told me her sister is a caretaker of OKU. And then she actually has been working with different caretakers in some centers. And this is why she has access to caretakers and also the disabilities. Because of that, I told her, by all means, you proceed. You proceed, okay? Because it is something feasible to her. Okay, so as a rule, something that is not possible, not feasible to one person may not be the case for another person. So there is no one size that fits all. It all depends on your situation. Okay, so do something that is feasible. Now, the problem that you may have is, I'm still new. How would I know that this would happen to me? If someone told me earlier, I would not have done something that I'm doing today. Well, I don't know where you are now, what situations you are in now. If you have not started, okay, number one, okay, I understand, because this involves your research design, something which we will discuss, Dr. Jayson will discuss later. When you do your chapter 1, how would you foresee what will happen later? So even when you are writing your chapter 1, you have to have your research plan, design, iron out, plan out, considered, so that you would take all this into consideration. What would be the scope of your study? What would be the delimitation of your study? The issue is, how would I know? How would I know? Okay, so number one, okay, you have to talk to your supervisor. Okay, of course, sometimes it works, sometimes it may not work. I do not want to elaborate. Number two, okay, you can talk to your senior, or you can look at all the past theses. Okay, you can look at all the past theses. Okay, number three, you can talk to other researchers. Okay, number four, you can talk to the practitioners, or you just observe. Okay, use your observation to see things, because that will help you to consider whether you should proceed what you planned earlier. So these are things that you can do. Okay, of course, you can also attend some events, academic conferences, workshops, for example, today, in order to know whether what you have in mind is feasible or not. What else should I consider before it is too late? All right. So, lastly, you may want to consider the environment that you are living in. Now, maybe this is not a good excuse for undergraduate students. This is more relevant to those who are doing your master's and PhD while you are working. While you are working, you have family members, you have jobs to do. For undergraduate students, your main job should be studying. Okay, of course, there may be some exceptions. So consider your environment. Okay, and from there you have to plan. Okay, you have to plan what works well for you, and 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 from there determine, the resources that you have. I have friends, well, I have many friends who are lecturers, and they are doing their PhD at the same time. Again, this is just an example. This is not a rule. One of the possible resources would be students. Students. Okay. So what my student did, she was an MBA student at the same time. She was working at a college. So she wanted to do her study, and she needed to collect her data. She needed to collect her data two times, two times, two times from the same respondents, and the respondents must be the same. I hope you hear it clearly. Yeah? She needed to collect data, based on her research problem, based on her research questions. She needed to collect data two times. And the respondents in the first round of data collection and the second round of data collection must be the same. So you can imagine it will be a huge, huge challenge for her to collect data using more intercept at the shopping mall. So what she did, what I told her to do, use your resources. Collect the data from the respondents who are actually students in that particular college. Why? Because it will be easier for her to collect data from the same respondents again. And for her, this actually made her life easier. She did not have to go out there to get strangers and to get them to promise to do it again the next time in the following week. She just had to, you know, approach students in a few classes when the survey was done, and she told them there will be another round. She will come back to them again, even though a few of them did not show up in the following week. She had enough sample size from 2 rounds of data collection to proceed with her research. This is just an example, okay? So don't generalize this to your situation. So my point is, consider your environment, your limitation, how you plan your time. And I'm very, very sure, despite of your limitation, there must be resources that you can utilize. You can do better than the others. And because of that, you can still proceed, you can still complete. Okay, I hope you find this helpful. So this is something which I wish to add on, so that we have a better plan, we come up with good research problem, research statements, questions, and objectives, so that we can complete our research. Not only that, we learn what we are supposed to learn in the process, so that we can become a better researchers, a more informed researcher. Back to you, Jayson. By the way, if you have any question, feel free to ask in the chat room because we have covered quite a bit. But we would like to focus on a bit of literature review and also, and most importantly, methodology in the remaining time. Thank you. Back to you, Jayson.
All right, thanks, Hiram. Okay, let's continue. Okay, next one would be the literature review section. All right, this part we will go a little bit faster simply because we need to keep our times for the methodology part. All right, so basically, what is literature review? Okay, literature review is basically the compilations of ideas of your theories as well as the construct that you use in your study. So when you look at literature review itself, it's not an annotated bibliography. Technically speaking, you are not, compile everything, just put it in, and expect your reader to go through and understand by their own. So that is not literature review. Okay, literature review is basically you read, you understand, and you come up with your own way of writing, telling us the story, how it flows. So definitely when it comes to literature review, right, we would require you to have, the theory that you use. Okay, remember why we need to have a theory simply because theory itself serves as a backbone of your research model for those who are doing quantitative study. So without a backbone of your entire model, definitely you know that someone will question your work if you don't have it. Okay, simply because if let's say you don't have a theory, the examiner or even your supervisor will ask you, are you actually plug and play? Plug and play in the sense that you actually take two variables from this article, another two variables from article B, and you combine it together and become your research model. So that is the impression that you will create to the supervisor as well as the examiners. So in order for you to come up with a good literature review, definitely the planning part must always be there. You must understand how you're going to put the storyline. So you must also know what are the theory that you use. Okay, some of you might use more than one theory. So it all depends on you. And ultimately, you must put it in the flow that it makes sense. And when the reader go through your work, they understand what is actually going on, from the beginning until the part where you come up with your entire research model. So besides that, literature review also focus on a specific topic of your interest. Definitely, when I mentioned to you earlier, my research is basically based on medical tourism. So when I mentioned to you medical tourism itself, it's just a context itself. It's just a context of a study. But the whole entire theory, I still look into the perspective of marketing. That is how I actually create the interest among the readers. For those who are really looking in the area of my research is basically from a marketing background. Okay, so some of the good literature review, you can actually publish it and it can actually become a standalone paper that you can put forward in journal publications so that people, when they go through your work, they understand what is actually going on. Okay, with the construct that you included as well as the theory that you evaluated in the write-up. Okay, so literature review, these are all the attributes. Definitely it's a technique of writing. Basically, when you want to put all the ideas together, right, you must plan it in a sense that if let's say you have a simple research model, then it would be easier. But if let's say your model is a little bit complicated, then you need to think of the way of writing it. Okay, maybe we don't have very much time in sharing this with you. Perhaps we can actually talk to Dr. Winnie. Maybe we can have a session itself for literature review, how to plan and how to write accordingly when it comes to this part. Okay, so of course, for this, I will give you a summary of everything. So if let's say back to the discussion that I mentioned earlier, okay, for those who are having a very complicated research model, right, I usually would suggest my students, for those who are actually, their model is a little bit complicated, to have 2 chapters. Okay, instead of chapter 2 designated for literature review, but they will have two. Two in the sense that the second chapter will still go with the literature review. Technically speaking, they only elaborate or explain about the construct or theories that they use for their study. But the additional chapter can be named as hypothesis development or conceptual development. So this is the new chapter created to relate the relationships amongst the variables and come up with the hypothesis accordingly. So by using this technique, definitely it would be more helpful for those who do not know how to, link all the ideas together, particularly when it comes to the very complicated research model. Because like I said earlier, writing is a technique of art. So you must have that kind of skill if you want to put everything together, so that when the reader go through your work, they can understand what you intend to do and what is the flow. And when they go through your work, they know how to follow your work accordingly. All right. So literature review is basically a chapter also provides supporting evidence. Of course, when it comes to the hypothesis development, right, you will tell us there is a relationship between A to B, for instance. So of course, before you propose this kind of relationship, definitely you must give us the evidence. Okay, so the past study, which one of that really support the relationship, or any of it that against it, for instance. So that is how we come up with the words of synthesis. Okay, synthesis is basically you look into the positive aspect of it as well as the negative aspect of it. So from these two perspectives, then you come up with your writing, then that support your arguments and also your hypothesis that you're going to develop later on. All right, these are all the step-by-step that you can actually consider. First thing first, like what I mentioned earlier, you always about the topic. So right after you already identify your topic, then you will identify the literature that you want to review, analyze it, summarize it into the literature table, or we call it the concept map format. And later on, you have to synthesize, okay, to have better idea what is actually going on, okay, with your research, particularly when it comes to the theory that you choose, as well as the construct that you included. Then only then you will proceed with the writing. Okay, so next thing would be the APA guidelines. Okay, many of the students will ask me, Cham, why you bring this up at the early stage? We are more interested in writing. Let me get the writing done only. I look at APA referencing. Okay, my humble suggestion to all of you here is this: when you do your writing, please do the referencing at the same time. You know what? Many of us, when we start to do our writing, we don't really care about the references. But you wouldn't be surprised at the end of the day, if you don't have, you don't record now or you don't cite all these references, right? You need to spend more time to get all these references. It's just a matter of you do it now or you do it later. Yeah, it's all up to you. But one thing that I noticed that previously, many years ago, when I start to do my works, research work, I don't really care about the referencing. I just write. Then only when the writing's already done, then only I go to these all references. You won't be surprised, I spend a lot of times, just to look for the references. And this is very, very difficult, because some of it I already forgotten where I actually refer to. For example, websites or some of it is referring to a certain journal that I couldn't retrieve anymore. And then I tell you, during that time I spent a lot of time just to find the references. Then I learned a lesson. Learn a lesson in the sense that from that particular moment onwards, whenever I write, I will cite accordingly. So this would be very helpful when it comes to the writing later on. Okay, most importantly, do it as early as possible. All right. Okay, like I said, first, this is basically the explanation from the point that I highlighted above. First thing first, you need to choose your topic, all right, and check the relevancy of it. And this is how you actually can identify your topic. Is you can go through a process called funneling, whereby you start with something general. For instance, in my case, right, okay, I look at medical tourism. So, okay, after medical tourism, so what? Which of the area that I will look at? Okay, so further read, after I gone through further reading, understand the research gap that I have, and then I focus on the branding aspect of the hospital. Okay, from the branding part, which context that I'm looking at? Is it on the brand image, or is it on the brand association, or is it on the brand trust? So based on my review, extensive review of the literature, then I go with the brand image, for instance. So of course, I would justify my argument accordingly. So from this is the process, like basically it start from a very general things, then it will be very, very focused at the end of the day. Okay, so later on, you will identify the literature that you will review. This is the part whereby you will go to all these databases. Of course, I would suggest you to go to the reputable publishers, journals published by them, simply because all their papers has been peer reviewed and already the idea is already being endorsed and approved by all these experts in the field. So whatever they have there, I think is already well accepted, so that at least the weightage, if is very much better compared to, if we refer to some of the reading materials that without research elements. Okay, by using keyword is one of the way for you to identify all these journals. So therefore, you must be good in keywords. All right, when you do a Google database search as well as the literature database search. All right, so these are all the strategies and tips that you need to take note. Okay, first thing first, strategize and plan. Like what I mentioned earlier, it's all about planning when it comes to research activities. So when it comes to a literature review, for example, you have 4 IV, 4 independent variables, go to 1 DV. Just for instance, you have this simple model, right? So the question here is this: which one should you discuss first? So you need to take note of all these possible questions. So if let's say you have this simple model, then usually we will advise you to go with your DV first. Then only you go to the IV, simply because when you go to the DV and after you start explaining the IV, right, you can form the hypothesis accordingly. Otherwise, you will not able to do it. Technically speaking, it's all the matter of planning. All right. Once you come up with the planning in terms of what would be the heading that comes first, then you can follow all these headings, accordingly. Then it will help you in terms of your writing. And the second thing, when it comes to literature review, right, please immediately document and cite the source of the work that you take the information from. This is very, very important. Okay, like I say before, if you don't do it now, later on you will spend a lot of time just because to find all these references. And third point is we actually get some statistic from a certain website, for example, Statistica, and also all the statistic website that can help you to argue or to in your research discussion. So all this source of information, please bookmark it. This is very important. If not, later on you will have a difficulty to look back for it. Okay, and some of us here, we only use hard copy. This one all depends on you. All right, if let's say you use hard copy, maybe you can use the post-it notes, at least you know where to refer to. And last but not least is always the transition sentence. Okay, this is very useful, particularly for those people when you, not for those people, for all of us when it comes to our writing, right? Before we introducing a new sentence or new section, at least at the prior section, we tell the readers what is going to happen next. It's like a storybook. Before I come to end of this chapter, right, I will be telling you what would be the next chapter. So at least you can see when you comes to the reading part, you will see the flow, so that the reader can follow your work accordingly without issue. All right. Okay, the next one would be research methodology. Okay, this is the core of the sharing for today. So when it comes to research methodology, right, this is one of the very important topic that you really need to take note besides other chapters that we have in our thesis. So as from the perspective of examiner, there are few types of examiner, and their way of for them to assess your work would be different as well. Okay, for me, I'm a very old school type of examiner, whereby usually when I have the thesis for sent to me for examination purpose, I will start with the first chapter, definitely. So from the first chapter itself, I will understand the background of your work and also the problem statement. Like I say, I want to see what you intend to challenge and what would be the possible contribution that you would like to have in your study in terms of your significance of the study. So from there, the next chapter I look at would be your final chapter. And then you will ask me a question, Cham, why don't you go to literature review first, but why you go to the last chapter? Okay, to make the long story short, things very simple, all right? For me, things is this. After reading your first chapter, the reason why I go to the last chapter is because I want to see whether did you respond to the research question and objective that you developed earlier. You know, it's like a movie, you know, when you have the beginning of the movie, definitely we will have the end as well. So I want to see whether did you address all the process or not. Okay, if and only if I found out that your chapter 5 is briefly presented or vaguely presented and you are not responding to your research question that you developed in the first chapter, this is going to be a very difficult situation. Okay, you will have troubles with your studies. All right, and definitely you know that your marks will be affected. I'm not here to frighten you, but I just want to share with you that the thesis itself is the process of responding to the things that you developed earlier. So technically speaking, when it comes to the writing part, your chapter 5 itself, you must also pay a lot of attention on it. Don't just simply because you thought that this is the last chapter, never mind lah, I simply do it. I don't have that kind of mentality because a lot of research, undergraduate research students usually neglected the last chapter. Okay, please take note. So right after I'm done with your final chapter, I will go to your methodology. This is something that we're going to discuss now. Right after the methodology, then I will look at your analysis. And the last but not least would be your literature review. And then you will question me again, Cham, why you look at literature review at the last? But I spend a lot of times, you know, when it comes to the reviewing or the literature, I do understand you spend a lot of time in writing up the literature review, but many of us as the examiner, right, we are much interested on what you intend to do first, the purpose of your research and how you execute it. Most of us, we agree and with you that you're supposed to know the area better. So therefore, we will leave the literature review at the last for a reason, because we know that you already know what is going on. Definitely, we assume that you are well versed when it comes to the literature presentation. So this is the privilege that we give to you as a researcher. So that is the reason why for me, in my personal point of view, I will keep it at the last because I trusted you when I assessing your work. So when it comes to research methodology, this is the part that we're going to look at it in technically speaking. I put this word, dissect the way you execute your study. And this is the part we're going to see how you design your research, how you collect your data, who would be your sample, what is the sampling method that you use, what is the sample size, etc., etc. And many of the students, they struggle with the research methodology. They do not know how to start it. You know, some of them, they will start with research design, but some of them, they will start straight away with questionnaire development. You know, the inconsistency will happen. And some of them, when they're writing their research methodology, they confuse which should come first. So to reduce the uncertainties as well as to make your life simple, I would suggest you to look at this diagram. This diagram is known as research onion. Onion in Bahasa, we call it bawang, bawang. The bawang that we eat. Okay, this is research onion. So this diagram itself is actually proposed by Saunders and Saunders et al. Back in 2012. So if you're thinking of writing your research methodology, you can look at how this thing works. Technically speaking, it's very straightforward. All right. When you look at this diagram itself, what you need to do for your research methodology, you need to address the outer layer. Okay, the outer layer. Then only then you move on to the inner layer. Okay, Means that you go with the authors, then you move to the, for example, the research philosophy, then you move on to the approach of theory development, methodological choice, strategies, time horizon, and also techniques and procedure. This is how it works. You use this as your guide. Okay, I have been using this. I use this for my PhD thesis, and many of my friends also use it in their thesis as well. And most of us, we submitted our work and we passed our PhD without issue. So technically speaking, it is a safe method for you to use. So for undergraduate students, if you do not know how to actually write your research methodology, you just need to use this diagram to serve as your guide. Okay, so first thing first, this is about research paradigm, or what we call as a research philosophy. Research philosophy is basically the term, right, that we relate to how the knowledge being developed and also its nature itself. All right, when it comes to the research paradigm, there are different researchers call it differently. Some of us, we call it research philosophy. Some of us, we call it research paradigm. Some of us, we call it worldview. Okay, some of us, we call it epistemologists or and ontologists. But don't worry, all these terms, it might sound different to many of us, but eventually they carry the same meaning. Technically speaking, they just want to understand your philosophical view and the nature of the knowledge that you want to develop. That's all. All right. So of course, when you look at research philosophy, you know, in your business research methodology textbook, there are quite numbers of it. All right. The most how to say, we put it say, the common one would be this four. All right. The first one would be positivism. All right. Positivism is basically the research approaches that employ empirical methods, make extensive use of quantitative analysis. Okay, to make the long story short, again, all right, this is tips and tricks for everything. If you use quantitative technique, or you intend to use survey questionnaire, and you will be using SPSS later on, or other software, Smart PLS, or even AMOS, so technically speaking, you will be in this group, positivism. Okay, why? Simply because you will make use of extensive use of quantitative analysis. All right. Another one would be realism. Realism is basically telling us that whatever happened in the reality is true. Okay, for example, right, after the rain, we will definitely have a rainbow. This is something that would happen beyond our control. So if you are looking in this kind of research, perhaps realism will definitely fit you. All right. Next one would be pragmatism. Pragmatism basically telling us that the way we look at research, right, is very subjective, because we cannot have a single point of understanding and view. Different people, different human, different mankind would definitely have different way of viewing things. All right. For example, if you went to the markets this morning, just assume you went to the market morning, right? Of course, you will see some of the, I put it this way, beggar, they actually ask for help, right? Ask for donation. When we observe this kind of scenario, right there, let's say there is one individual give 1 ringgit, but another person will give 10 ringgit. Then sometimes we will assume that the 10 ringgit, the person who gives 10 ringgit is more generous compared to the 1 ringgit. But unfortunately, when you understand the situation better, right, the person who give 1 ringgit, perhaps that is the only ringgit that he have. You know, so technically speaking, what I want to share with you is the way we look at things, the way we observe things will be very different among individuals. All right. So that is the reason why we have the so-called multiple realities. If you can look at this diagram itself, it's basically came from a movie, you know, by Leonardo DiCaprio. It's basically telling us when you look at certain things, it will be different in certain dimension. All right. Next one would be interpretivism. Is basically understand the difference between humans in our role as a social actors. So of course, if your study is pertaining to understand the cultural differences, for example, if we want to understand the cultures of, let's say, our friend in Middle Eastern, So technically speaking, you can actually stay with them for quite some time. Then you learn the process. Then you will understand their lifestyle better. Then that is how you can get better understanding in terms of their style and also their cultures. All right. So this is the summary of everything. But most of the time, to make the long story short, for undergraduate student, usually like what Dr. Hiram say, you are bounded by the time frame. So usually we would recommend you to look at following the approach of positivism. Technically speaking, you will collect data, you will get all these statistics, then you will argue your case. Whether your hypothesis is supported or vice versa, it all depends on your analysis later on. But of course, doing this, you must make sure that your questionnaire are all well developed, according to the recommendations by the past studies as well. All right, right after you deal with the outer layer of the research philosophy, then we will move on to the next layer. Okay, the next layer would be approach to theory development. When it comes to the second layer, there are only two approaches that you need to take note. All right, first thing first would be deductive approach. Then another one would be inductive approach. Okay, so the question here is, let's say you're using survey questionnaire and SPSS. So which one would you be using? By looking at the definition itself, I can make a conclusion that you will be going for the first one, simply because if you can recall on how you write your research, your literature review, basically you are using a deductive approach in the sense that you have your theory, right? Right after you have your theory, then you develop the hypothesis accordingly. And your ultimate goal is to test the hypothesis, am I right? Yes. So when you want the theory and hypothesis are developed and tested, then you are actually following the deductive approach. This is your direction of your study. On the other hand, inductive approach, they don't have a theory or hypothesis to guide them. For this group of researchers, usually they will only come out with all this theory and hypothesis at the end of their study. So usually for those who are doing qualitative, don't worry, later I will mention about what's the difference between quanti and quali. They will go for inductive approach. So our case here for those who are thinking of using survey questionnaire, thinking of using SPSS, Smart PLS, or even AMOS, if you're using this, if you're thinking of this direction, then you are basically a quantitative researcher, then you will be using a deductive approach. So these are some of the differences between deduction and also induction. Okay, when you look at the deduction itself, you see there are few attributes that you can take note to differentiate this approach compared to the others. For example, when you look at the point number 2, is moving from theory to data. And this is what we do most of the time. All right, we will develop our literature review, then we come up with our hypothesis. All these hypotheses before we develop, we are actually referring to the theory that we read, isn't it? The past articles. Okay, so we are collecting a quantitative data. Why quantitative data is because when you create your questionnaire, right, the respondent will answer accordingly based on numbers. All right, you also will take note of the operationalizations of the concept. So for example, if you want to measure the service quality of a restaurant, so of course you will adapt and adopt the question from a past studies. This is what we mean by the operationalization part of it. You must know how to measure or operationalize it. And also, when it comes to deduction approach, you must also take into consideration the importance of the sample size. Many years ago, we are actually fine with the theoretical support when it comes to sample size. Okay, what I mean by theoretical support is something like when you look at certain research methodology textbook, right? Some of the textbook will tell you you only need 300 sample size. For example, Saunders, right? Saunders mentioned very clear, as long as you have 300 sample size, it can represent a big population. That is what Saunders and his friend argue. But on the other hand, when you look at Hare et al. Multivariate textbook, he mentioned that if you want to use structural equation modeling technique, okay, you need a critical sample size of 200. You see or not, different textbook, different guru have different argument when it comes to the sample size. This is what happened in the past. In the past, you can use this to support you. Unfortunately, nowadays, things is different. All right. Why I say things is different is because statistically things has improved, and when you look at the reviewer nowadays, or even some of the examiner, they instead of having the theoretical support, you must also have the statistical support as well. Okay, that is the reason why if you read some of the journal article, you will came across the term of G power software. Okay, maybe Daniel sloper calculator for, something like this. All this technique or all these tools is basically used by researcher to count the minimum sample size that they need to have for their research model. Now you can see research is basically the evolving process. In the past, we can depend solely on the theoretical perspective, but now things have changed. We must also consider the statistical point of view as well. All right. So don't worry, all these things are available in a recent publication in many of the journal articles. You can actually go through and you can find all the evidence for your understanding. All right. Right after we done with the second layer, definitely, like for example, just assume I'm conducting a study using SPSS, and I know that I want to use SPSS to do the analysis. Definitely, I'm in deduction. Then I will move on to the next layer. Okay, in this layer, then I would need to decide which technique or which method should I choose. Okay, there are three common techniques here. The first one would be quantitative technique. All right. The second one would be qualitative, and the third one would be mixed method, or we call it triangulation method. All right. So for my case, since that I'm telling you earlier, I'm using survey questionnaire, I already have the mindset that I'm going to use SPSS, then I will be quantitative growth. Okay, because I will be using numbers to help me to make decisions. All right. Quantitative researcher depends a lot on numbers and statistics to help them to make decisions. All right. Whereas on the other hand, qualitative researcher, they actually based on their interpretations, words, they based on their interviews, the observation, to help them to draw the conclusion of their observation. And when it comes to the mixed method here, you see, it's already mentioned very clear, mixed method. Technically speaking, they are actually combining two techniques at one time. Okay. For example, quanti plus qualitative. Then this is what we call mixed method. Okay. For undergraduate student, we would suggest you to go with something easy, something straightforward, easier for you to get it done within the semester allocated for your research project. Then it would be quantitative. All right. But I'm not telling you that quantitative is much superior than others. Huh? Please don't get me wrong. Okay. I'm suggesting quantitative for the undergraduate student is simply because, like what Dr. Hiram said, you are bounded with time. So if I'm not mistaken, like in my university, right, undergraduate student, we only give them one long and one short semester to get the research done. So of course, as much as we appreciate, the inputs that can be generated through qualitative, but due to the time constraint itself, we would suggest the student to go for quantitative for reason. Because if let's say you go for the qualitative research, right, if you're not able to get the right person for you to interview, then it's going to be very, very difficult for you. But for quantitative, at least if your topic is quite general, you can actually approach, consumers out there or even your peers to answer on the questionnaire that you develop. But of course, the direction of the study must be related to them. If let's say you only focus on, let's say, purchase decision among university students, for instance, and then your peers can be your respondent. But of course, when it comes to research, we definitely want you to explore a little bit more. Definitely, we will not ask you, just to focus solely on among your friends, because if you only focus on students itself, the implications or the benefit of the study might not be so obvious, and this definitely will not add much value to the existing body of knowledge. All right. So basically, this slide will tell us the differences between quantitative and qualitative. All right. When you look at quantitative itself, okay, I will use quantitative as a main. I will discuss this one. Then I will contrast it with qualitative. So when it comes to quantitative, right, you see the keyword here is always numbers and statistics. All right, numbers and statistics will help you to make decisions. All right, so quantitative is more straightforward lah. Okay, I'm a little bit biased in this sense, but since that I'm the quantitative researcher, the main reason for me to go for quantitative is because I only believe in numbers. Because numbers itself will tell us a certain findings. All right, because if let's say we go for qualitative in terms of interpretation, right? Maybe whatever you interpret and the way I understand it might be different. So there is the possible, argument that can arise, based on the different understanding of a certain subject or topic. But anyway, that, like I said earlier, there is no any school of thought which is much better than which. But eventually, if let's say you want to go for qualitative, you just decide and argue your case. And most importantly, you have to remember, deciding either quantitative or qualitative, you must justify why you go with that technique. Okay, remember there is no right or wrong. Okay, so for quantitative, like what we discussed earlier, is basically based on deductive reasoning, and we will have our predefined variables and measurement. So technically speaking, this is the part where you will came across the word adapt or adopt. Your supervisor will definitely ask you this question: where you get this item from? For example, you have this construct with the name of customer loyalty. They will ask you how you measure it. For instance, yeah. And quantitative is much more focused on the cause and effect relationship, but qualitative nowadays is also started to evolve, whereby in the past, qualitative, usually we will saw a lot of researcher, right? They are actually using the manual coding kind of technique, but things have changed. And that is the reason why when you look at qualitative risk as well. So that's the reason why you came across the name of this software, such as NVivo, ATLAS-TI, or even QuickCost, for instance. All right. So this is basically the explanation of quantitative approach. It is a very systematic scientific investigation of data. Data here is basically the response that you get through your questionnaire. If you can relate to what I say, for example, if your questionnaire asks you a question about customer loyalty, right? If you, let's say you have 5 questions, you have and you are using the Likert scale of 1 to 6, right? So the respondent will answer 5, 6, or 4. All these are your data. All this is the data. All right. And the objective of using quantitative research is to develop and employ mathematical models, theory, and hypothesis. Okay. And basically, we use statistics for greater precision and objectivity. That's the reason why we have p-value. Some of us, like let's say you're using smart PLS, we go for t-value. It all depends. And like I said earlier, it's a deductive model. Okay, so these are all the important things that we need to take note if, let's say, we want to embark in the quantitative approach. First thing first, we must know how to operationalize our construct. And this is very important. Okay, for this one, you need to take note of these 2 words, adapt and adopt. Adopt here means, if let's say you go through a journal article, like what I showed you earlier, one of the paper, when I developed when myself and Dr. Hiram developed this measurement scale for destination image, right? When you go to the appendix, if let's say you think that, all the measurements suit your research and you want to use it 100% without modification. Technically speaking, you want to copy and paste in your study, in your questionnaire. That is what we call adopt. Adopt means that you use everything without modification. All right. On the other hand, adapt, A-D-A-P-T, adapt means you take it, but somehow, some way you feel that the question that I asked does not suit your research purpose. So you go ahead and do some slight modification to suit your research. So by having some modification in the process, this is what we call adapt. All right, so this would be the difference, adopt and adapt. Okay, to make the long story short, adopt means you photostat, you copy and paste. Adapt means you copy but you modify it. Okay, both are equally good when it comes to quantitative research. I repeat, both are equally good. All right. Why I have to highlight this simply because I hope that none of you actually come out with your own question without going through a proper technique of developing a questionnaire. Because I have few students that I actually met with, you know, the way they designed the questionnaire, you know what they did or not? They actually come up with their own question. Because I asked them, please show me your questionnaire. You know what they did, right? A week before my meeting with them, they actually created this on their own. They just write out the question. Then I asked them, where you get this item from? Then he told me he created himself. So the moment you created yourself is already wrong. Because why? When you come to this questionnaire development, right, you need to go through a certain process. Okay, for instance, how it works is something like this. You need to have a focus group first. Focus group meaning to say that you must bring people in together. Maybe usually you will go with the numbers between 7 maybe to 12 person in this group of this focus group, right? Then you have to ask them what is their opinion. Let's say you're asking them what do they understand about corporate image. Then everyone will tell you what they understand about corporate image. That is how you actually generate the pool of idea. Okay, so you cannot only go with only one focus group. You must go with series of it. It usually, like our case, when it comes to the paper that I showed you earlier, we gone through 3 to 4 focus group. Then only we able to have the finalized the idea that we have for the medical tourism destination image. Right after that, then we have to do in-depth interview. Then we have to approach the industry expert. We have to approach the medical tourists to finalize what we have from the focus group. So from the in-depth interviews, of course, we will go with about 20 to 30 of them. And then we will start to do another round of pre-testing. Then we do pilot testing. Then we have to collect the data. Then we have to do exploratory factor analysis. Then we have to do confirmatory factor analysis. Then only then the measurement skill can be confirmed. You see or not, the process itself for us to create the measurement skill for that particular paper is already 1.5 years. So that is the reason why, if you are going for quantitative study, right, please look at these 2 words, adopt and adapt. Refer to the past study and never create your own questionnaire. If you create your own questionnaire, you will land yourself in trouble. Okay, so take note of this. The first point, operationalization of the construct. The second part would be questionnaire design and also your secondary data. Because some of you, I believe that you are from a finance area or economics area, definitely you will be using a secondary data. So of course, when you use the secondary data, please make sure that the reliability of the source of the data itself. All right. So the third one would be sampling strategies. What are the strategies that you should use? And ultimately, the next one would be the data analysis procedure. So of course, you see the process is all interrelated when it comes to this one, simply because let's say you are creating a survey questionnaire, if you are using continuous skill, you will know that what kind of analysis that you will be using. Okay, for example, a continuous skill, usually you will ended up using maybe correlation test or regression test. All right. But if let's say you are thinking to have, like, for example, tests like independent sample t-test or ANOVA for that kind of for that case, then you must know that one of your construct must be in the categorical form. So therefore, while designing your questionnaire, you must also predict what kind of analysis that you will be using. So this is what we call a sort of reverse engineering. You must understand how it affects another. So therefore, when it comes to your questionnaire design, you must really put effort in it. Okay, don't go for the shortcut. If you don't do the things right at the first place, definitely you will have troubles later on. Okay, so these are this is the example, okay, on how you can actually find the measurement variables. For example, this is one of the paper that I actually capture from. So you see the construct here, maybe when you look at these terms, innovativeness, right? This is how they ask the question. 3 questions here. I like to take chances. New products are usually gimmicks. For example, I like to experiment. So you can, if let's say if you think that this kind of questions suit your research purpose, you can just take it, 100% without modify for your study. But if you think that you want this item, but it doesn't suit your research that well, and you want to do some slight modification, you can. And that is what we call adaptation. So the best thing for those who are using survey questionnaire, please look for research, the past publication. That is the place that you can find all these measurement variables, okay, for your questionnaire development. All right. The best practice would be something like this. For example, if let's say you want to have this customer satisfaction in your questionnaire, right? Definitely you will review a lot of papers related to customer satisfaction. Okay, paper A, they will tell you this is how they measure it. Okay, paper B will tell you different things. Paper C will tell you different things. Doesn't matter. What you need to do, whatever have a paper A, you copy and paste first in a document. Paper B, you did the same as well. You copy and paste. Paper C, you copy and paste. And out of all this information that you gather together, right, then you discuss with your supervisor, which one should you use? So at least it provides you an opportunity, to make comparison across the way how people measure it before you decide the final skill in your questionnaire. So this is the important considerations for questionnaire development. First thing first, you must know the objective and also your research question. Why what you want to do, and what is the thing that you want to address. And these are the 2 questions that you need to ask yourself. All right. Of course, when it comes to the questionnaire development, like what I keep on emphasizing earlier, you must refer it based on the evidence from the past literature. Adapt and adopt. Please remember these 2 keywords, and never think of coming with your own question. All right. The third one would be the data analytical methods, and this is something that I would like to emphasize here. Very important, because the nature of the data that you collected will determine what kind of analysis that you will be using. So this is very important. Okay, because I actually encounter, even though not only at the undergraduate level, even in a PhD level, we also have this kind of issue whereby a student, they come up with their questionnaire, they already came out the question, they already collected the data, but then they are in trouble. Then they start to attend my workshops and ask me, Cham, Dr. Cham, what kind of analysis that I can use set for them, because they attempt to put reverse gear anymore unless they want to recollect it. you see, if you don't play at the beginning, right, you will have the scenario like them, whereby when you already collected the data, you do not know what kind of analysis that you can use. Like, let's say you want to talk about causation, for example, the cause and effect. Okay, let's say you are talking about the influence of customer satisfaction and also customer loyalty. Of course, in the literature, we know that if you are satisfied, then you will be, you will be loyal to the service provider. But just imagine that if, let's say, you put two things together in a categorical form, yes, you still can have the output, but when it comes to interpretation part, you might not able to discuss the causal effect part, particularly when it comes to the beta value, that can represent the strength of the relationship. So that is why I say the third point itself is very closely associated with the way how you really need to take note while preparing your questionnaire. Okay. My humble suggestion to all of you here is this: once you're done with your questionnaire, right, design, meet up with your supervisor, discuss with your supervisor first. Okay, if let's say your supervisor already endorsed your work, and then please do the, talk to the experts from a statistical background. Then they will tell you whether can it really be measured or not? Does it make sense or not later on when it comes to your output of your analysis? Right after that, please do a pre-testing. This is very, very important. Pre-testing is basically you are checking with all the experts again, being the academic, industries, or even the potential respondent. So this group of people will give you their feedback. If, let's say, for example, you have a first question and the way they look at it, the moment they read it, their eyebrow is already raised. Technically speaking, from the observation itself, that they're already confused with the first question. So from that particular observation, you already know something is not right with the question. So you must ask them, if possible, give you the feedback so that you can go back and revisit the question again to ensure that your final version can be easily understood by all your potential respondents later on. All right. So pre-testing is something that you shouldn't skip when it comes to questionnaire development. All right, these are some of the important notes for you to consider when you're thinking of designing your questionnaire. First thing first, you must, of course, have your introductory section. Or we put it this way, some of your questionnaire, if you've seen before, there would be a cover page. The cover page itself will tell the potential respondent what is the objective, what are the objective of the study and the purpose itself. All right, this is very, very important. Please explain it clearly, simply because it will help you, okay, at the procedural stage when it comes to the context of this common method bias. Okay, I'm not going to cover this in detail, common method bias. So technically speaking, you are explaining the purpose of your study in detail to your respondent. So the cover page itself, you must make sure it is well written. So when it comes to the questionnaire, okay, which you can consider actually going with the funnel approach. You can ask a very general question, then only you make it very specific. And all the question must be well designed and it should not be overcrowded. Okay, technically speaking, you shouldn't cram everything together. Make it simple, sweet, and short. Yeah, that is what we usually prefer if you try to respond to a certain questionnaire. Okay, and all the psychological question, you're asking about their lifestyle, how many times, for example, how many, let's say you ask those people who smoke, right? You ask them how many pack of cigarettes that they consume, even though they consume more, but they are not comfortable to tell you the numbers, or perhaps maybe you ask them a question like, are you an ethical person? If let's say you ask me this kind of question, right, even though I'm not a very ethical person, I will tell you I am a very ethical person because I want to look good in your eyes. So all these questions, sensitive psychological question, you have to ask yourself, is it important for your study or not? If it is not important, please do not include it. Because the moment when you include it in your study, when some of the respondents who cannot take it positively, they will hold back, they will hold back, and they will start not feeling not comfortable in responding to your question. So this is something that you really need to take note. Unless, for example, question like how many packs of cigarette that you consume is one of your research objective. If let's say that is one, then you really need to convince them and ask them to respond to your questionnaire in an open-minded way. Okay, so of course, at the end of your questionnaire design, you must be ended up with the thank you statement to show that you appreciate their effort, in responding to the questionnaire that you have. Okay, of course, when it comes to questionnaire design, avoid complexity, use simple language, not too long, and also avoid loaded question, like what I said earlier, the social desirable answer. Like if you're asking a person, are you ethical person, are you an honest person, that kind of question. Even though I'm not ethical or honest, but I will tell you my answer is yes. To show you that I'm a good person. You see, this is the possible bias that could happen. Okay, next one would be avoid double-barreled question. A double-barreled question is one of the common mistakes made by a lot of researchers. Technically speaking, when we look at double-barreled question, it's something like this, Cham is a fat and cute person. Okay, just assume Cham is a fat and cute person. All right. When you look at the statement itself, you do not know what to respond. You just say, Cham, you are fat, but you're not cute. How to answer? Just because the question itself is asking two things at one time. All right. So this is what we mean by double-barrel question. If you want to ask these two asking whether fat and cute, then it would be good for you to split it into two. Cham is the fat person, 1 to 5, agree or disagree. Another question would be Cham is cute, for example. Just for instance, for learning purpose. All right. And next, don't make assumption, because as much as we do data collection, we want the respondent to answer in a very genuine way, so that we can get something from it. Okay. All right, this would be the secondary data. Okay, like I said earlier, secondary data are those who actually work in the area of finance and also economics. Then you will depends a lot on this secondary data. So of course, all this data basically is the historical part, and they already been captured, by a certain databases. So for those who are embarking in this area, then secondary data is one of the way they analyze and help them to come out with the findings. All right, so this would be the advantages and disadvantages for it. The advantages would be inexpensive and obtained rapidly, but the disadvantages is sometimes, the secondary data is like 10 years, 20 years ago. So this would be the issue that we have with this secondary data. All right. So next that we need to know is basically the terms itself. So when it comes to sampling strategies, of course, as a researcher, we want to cover the populations, or we call it a census study. Census study, technically speaking, you are able to reach every single members within the population. Of course, this is totally impossible for us, because even the government, they themselves also have a difficulty in conducting a census study. What about us as an individual researcher? Definitely, we will have a lot of limitation. So that is the reason why, when you look at what we are learning right now, we are focused more on sample instead of population, because we only draw a subset of population for our research purpose. Okay, so to make the thing simple, right? Population is basically, if let's say, I put it this way, I give you an example. If let's say I want to conduct a study related to consumer behavior among Utah students when it comes to this phone purchase, right? So when I actually doing the population study, is technically I have to cover all the students, from the foundation until the postgraduate students. So these are all the population elements that I need to approach. So that is what we call population study. But of course, we know that it is impossible because definitely we were not able to get the list, okay, from a registrar. So if let's say some of the UCTS students over here, if you go to your registrar, you request for a list, definitely they will not give it to you because of the Private Data Protection Act. All right, this is something that we need to take note. So that is the reason why we ended up using sample. Okay, sample. Sample is smaller and it helps us to address like the issue of cost and time, because if like let's say I want to cover the whole entire population members of population of Utah student, I'm not able to do it because in Sungai Long campus we have about 11 to 12,000 students, but in Kampa we also have about 16 to 17,000 students. So technically speaking, I'm not able to cover everyone. So instead of cover the whole population, why not I go with sample that can represent them? All right. So these are all the steps that you need to take note when it comes to sampling method. Of course, the first one would be your target population. And then you have to decide on your sampling frame, your sampling strategy, and determine the technique, sample size, and also select the actual sample unit. All right, don't worry, I will go into one by one. Okay, the first one is the target population. Like I said earlier, let's say I'm focusing on Utah students, right? Then this group of people, Utah student, would be my target population. And that is the first step. All right. The second part would be determining the sampling frame. Okay, for example, right, like what I mentioned just now, if let's say Utah, we have about 26,000 students, then I will need to go to registrar to request for the registration list. But you know, I'm not able to get it, definitely. The list itself is what we know as sampling frame. You know, the list of student, okay, this student, where he or she from, which faculty, definitely I'm not able to have the access to it. So without the sampling frame, then it will bring me to the third step. All right, second step is to determine the sampling frame, the list. If I don't have it, then we will come to the third step, which is deciding the sampling strategy. When it comes to sampling strategy, we have two techniques, the common one. The first one would be non-probability sampling technique. Another one would be probability sampling technique. Of course, many of the researchers, particularly from the social science, we would like to have probability sampling technique. We would like to have, but unfortunately, most of the time we are not able to get it. So just to share with you, most of my publication and also my research until today is all under non-probability sampling technique. Even though I don't have a sampling frame, but if you look at the past argument or evidence given by the gurus of the area, for example, Professor Joseph Head, he did mention very clear that if your study is looking at hypothesis testing, you know, hypothesis testing, you know, H1, H2, you want to check the hypothesis now whether it's significant or not. Non-probability sampling technique is good enough. All right. So another constraint that I have most of the time would be the sampling frame, because I cannot get, because my area is very much related to medical, you know, tourism based or medical tourism, whereby you know that I'm not able to get the list from a from this immigration. Sorry, yeah, immigration. Definitely, if you ask me to go to immigration office to get the list of medical tourists, definitely they will not give it to me. So at the first place, you already know it very clear, I'm not able to get a sampling frame. On the other hand, the theory also tells us that non-probability sampling is good enough for hypothesis testing. That is the reason why I harp on these two arguments. Then my research mostly ended up with the non-probability sampling technique. So in non-probability sampling technique, there are few, you know, methods that you can actually, or approach that you can use. Number one would be convenience sampling, judgmental sampling, quota sampling, and snowball sampling. All right. All these things, I believe that you can learn from your business research method class at your institution. But most of the time, for my research, I will usually use this judgmental sampling, or we call it purposive sampling. So because like, for example, like my respondent is this medical tourist, so I will impose a screening question to them. First thing first, I want to know whether did they came to Malaysia for medical purpose? And secondly, did they enjoy any tourism services in Malaysia during their visit? If the answer is to this question yes, then they are qualified to become my respondent. By screening them through these two questions, basically I'm using this technique called judgmental sampling, because I want to get the best, the right respondent for my study. Okay, it's like a saying goes, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't have a technique to control your data collection, definitely at the end of the day, you will have issue with your outputs. All right. So of course, probability sampling technique, you will have all this approach: simple random sampling, systematic, stratified, and cluster sampling. All right. Okay, the next step, like I mentioned earlier, is basically your sample size. So sample size here, you can calculate through the software that we have. This is more to the statistical point of view. If let's say you are looking at the theoretical point of view, you can add that you need 300. Like here, they mentioned that 20:1. And also analysis method also will help you to determine your sample size. For example, if you want to use exploratory factor mean analysis, right, here also suggests you to have about 300 sample size to get a convincing result. So it all depends. All right. So as a researcher, you must exhaust all this literature that you have, and you use the one that actually can support your choice of all these numbers that you decide for your sample size. All right. Again, it goes back to the fundamental belief that you need to justify. You see, and you can see, I hope that you can see now, the entire research process is about justification only. How you go justify, argue your case and stick to it. And right after you're done with the sample size, then you will select the actual sampling unit. So this is the part time that you actually approach your respondent and collect your data from them. So of course, once you're done with your data collections, then you need to do the so-called data analysis. So these are some of the common software that you can see in the market nowadays. For example, like qualitative, you will came across NVivo, Atlas DI, Excel, and etc. Whereas for quantitative, you will have SPSS, structural equation modeling, MATLAB, and others. Okay, and when it comes to quantitative study, usually some of the students will confuse, what is SPSS? Another one, what is means by structural equation modeling technique, all right? Because in Malaysia, right, most of the supervisor in the postgraduate level, they would prefer the student to use SEM, SEM, structural equation modeling, all right? But for our undergraduate student, you can actually still use SPSS, all right? SPSS now they are actually improving, by having a lot of this macro that you can actually install in SPSS that could help you to generate the same output like what we have in SEM, structural equation modeling. All right, the significant difference between SPSS and SEM would be the different generation technique. SPSS is the first generation technique, whereas SEM is considered as second generation technique. Okay, what I mean by first generation technique is because if let's say you look at your research model, if you have 4 IV, go to 1 DV, and this DV go to another variable. So technically speaking, when it comes to this kind of modeling, you cannot run everything at one go. You need to split it first. All right, the first part, you will use multiple regression, and the second part, you will use regression or correlation test. You see, you cannot do everything together. But for structural equation modeling, when you look at the picture itself, you see they are doing simultaneously. So technically speaking, when you use SEM, right, you can run your research model at one time. So they can do everything together simultaneously. So this is the difference between SPSS and also SEM in the layman terms. All right, so right after you're done with the analysis, of course, you need to present your research results. Okay, so most importantly, when it comes to this part, right, treat your examiner like they know nothing about research. This is very, very important. Okay, don't assume that, oh, my examiner already know. I no need to do normality test. I can straight away do regression. You never know, even though they already know, but they purposely put it in a report for you if you didn't do the basic stuff for that particular analysis. So try to treat your examiner, they know nothing, prepare, give them what they expect from you. Go back to the fundamental part, okay? Your reporting must be clear, neat, and precise when it comes to presenting your research results. And this is always the most feared section because your examiner will pick up, some of the errors in your reporting. Okay. So usually it all depends. For this one, I let you read in on your own because for those who are doing quantitative and qualitative, the way you report your finding would be different. Okay, but overall, when you report, right, it must make sense to the reader. That is the most important thing. So these are all the major elements when it comes to presenting your data. So you will have your introductions, of course, you will do the screening, dealing with all the missing data or cleaning of the data. And then you will have your descriptive analysis. For those who are using survey questionnaire, of course, you have a section called demographic profile. This is the part you park it under the descriptive analysis. Then you deal with the reliability and the validity of the construct. Then you test the hypothesis. Then you will have your chapter summary. So of course, all this can stand alone as a sharing session, which myself and Dr. Hiram hope that we can share with you in the future for this one. All right, so final part of the research, a quick one. I know we are already running out of time. So these are all the major elements that you need to take notes. It's a part, you see, it's a process. Once you're done with the analysis, of course, you need to present all the findings, to the reader. Like I said earlier, at the beginning of a session, right? Research is basically responding to what you develop, the gaps that you identified earlier, and also the research question that you put forward. So for this particular section, you also need to highlight this as well. All right. So you need to discuss your finding. You must relate all this finding to the theoretical aspect as well as the managerial context. Limitations, you must address it as well because none study in this world are perfect. All right. And also you must put recommendation for the future studies and also conclusions. So of course, all these things, okay, you can actually read through and understand it. And most importantly, when it comes to research, you must have two important elements, like I said earlier, in your significance of the study as well. Theoretical implication, how your study actually benefit the body of knowledge or add value to it. That's number one. Number two is how your study can benefit the practical aspect. For example, the policymaker, the industry player, how they can benefit from the study. You must put yourself in their shoes. This is how you actually come out with your practical implication. So these two things you need to take note because these two things will be your selling point as well, beside your research problem and the gaps that you addressed earlier. Okay, so of course, limitations, you must address it. None of the study is perfect. But of course, you don't keep on telling us that I don't have much resources, so I cannot collect this data. I don't have time. Those reasons are very lame. So don't try to put it in your write-up. Because as a researcher yourself, right, in fact, you're already given the room for you to address it at the first place. So in fact, you must take initiative, to address it, but not telling people that at the in your write-up that all these are your limitations in terms of cost, time, and others. It looks not professional, Okay, so then you make a summary of the conclusions, you summarize your finding, make a recommendation, and put forward your future research. So once you have all this, you are basically done with your entire research write-up. So it sounds very complicated, but technically speaking, it's all about technique. So if you already, if you learned and you understand the technique, God willing, you were able to do well, and also you will complete your research within the time frame allocated to you. So for that, thank you very much. We already come to the end of our sharing for today. Dr. Hiram, maybe you have something to add? Thank you.
Thank you, Jayson. Like I said earlier, this is a huge topic. and 3 hours are never enough. So it proves. But anyway, Jayson, thank you so much for your effort to cover so many topics, and you presented really, really well. I hope all of you out there would learn something. Some of you, as I said, are actually doing your postgraduate studies. Most of you are doing your undergraduate programs, and you are all in different stages. So it is quite difficult for us to accommodate all the needs at the same time. However, let's look at chapter 3, or the chapter on methodology in particular. This is what Jayson covered in the final hour. I mentioned in the chat room that one thing that we can do is to look for thesis, past thesis. The study may not be entirely similar to yours. However, it is in the same discipline. It is on the same topic, and it is recently made available online, meaning the students graduated last year, the year before. Assuming it is a good thesis, this is where you can have a feel how methodology should be written. This is where you can have a good idea what would be the relevant theories, what would be the relevant constructs, variables. And also in the chat room, we mentioned that this is also where you can find the relevant measurement items that you would like to use in your study. Usually these questionnaire, these items are available at the end of the thesis or journal articles. They may be shown somewhere in the middle, either under methodology or findings. If there is none, and this study is so relevant to yours, we just have to email the author, ask him or her politely whether they could share with us the questionnaire, the items, the measurement items. We are more interested with the measurement items because when we talk about questionnaire, it includes the cover page, the demographic profile. These are the things we have to design. So what we want is actually the measurement items used to measure the constructs, the variables in our study, because we need to use these constructs and we need to assess their relationship in order to explain the phenomena we are investigating. And this must be part of our research problem, research questions. Okay, so there are so much to talk about. One thing which I would like to add on is pre-test and pilot study. When we finalize, when we design our instrument, it could be a survey, a questionnaire, an interview, a focus group, online survey, self-administered survey, whatever it is always advisable, recommendable to do a stringent pre-test and pilot study if necessary. Pilot study. These are two different things. Again, we have no time to go into details. The reason is simple, as I mentioned in the chat room, when I responded to a question. We are dealing with human beings. When a questionnaire is passed to you, tell me, in your experience, will you be doing it willingly, happily, accurately all the time? So unfortunately, we are not living in an ideal world. People are busy. There are so many biases we cannot control. Okay, we call it randomized bias. Is it, Jayson? Or random bias? You cannot control. When you pass a questionnaire to a person, you cannot control him not to watch TV when he does the questionnaire. You just cannot control. There may be a word that he cannot understand. Do you think he would check the dictionary, double check, and then only he writes the answer? No. So there are randomized control or random errors. There are also systematic errors which we can do something to reduce. Okay, so there is a lot more to it, but I believe we did enough in 3 hours to give you some ideas what the major components are, what you should know, what are some of the tips and tricks you should be aware of, and like it or not, we leave a room where you know that these 3 hours are still not enough. There are more to it, and all of you have to do some studying. Textbook will be a good place to begin with. Like I said, past thesis will be a good place to begin with. Now, the message happens to pop up on my screen. Pre-test and pilot study is compulsory. Okay, if you get lucky, you did not do it, and your examiner did not ask. On one hand, I would say your supervisor did not do a good job. On the other hand, the examiner also should have picked up this matter. In a more practical sense, if you are serious about your research, why did you not do pre-test and pilot study? Because again, like I said, for example, you adopt a questionnaire from UK and you want to do it in Malaysia. In UK, that study is about, let's say, a cultural event. And in Malaysia, you also want to do a study on cultural event. You may think that these two events are exactly the same. And therefore, when I read that article published in UK, when I adopt the questionnaire from that article, I can use it directly. Why? Because the phenomena we are investigating are the same. Then you may run into trouble later. Why? Even though the topic is apparently the same, the issue is apparently the same, you must realize the questionnaire is not for you to provide data. The questionnaire is for the respondents to provide data. Therefore, the question is, are the respondents in UK and Malaysia the same? Would Malaysian respondents understand the questionnaire developed in UK the manner it is intended? So it is more about comprehensibility. It is no longer about the validity of the constructs. So this happened to my student before. Okay, there is a statement, I forget what it is, but in UK, they use the word unexpected to describe the excitement of the event in UK or maybe in Australia, because these people are more adventurous than Malaysia. When this item is used in Malaysia, they interpret unexpected in a negative way. Can you see the problem now? The events are similar, but the contexts are different because respondents are different. The word unexpected in Australia, it is interpreted as something adventurous, positive. But when it is interpreted by Malaysian respondents, that incident happened, that questionnaire happened not long after MH370. When they see that word, they interpreted it as a negative word. As a result, you can imagine they misunderstood the item, and how on earth they would give you the right answer if they misunderstood in the first place. This is why pilot tests and pre-tests are very, very important. Now, we don't have time. I may surprise you if I tell you many people do or did pilot study wrongly as well. Many times the problems with us, including myself, is that we read things selectively. We only read what people cite. We do not actually read the original articles. So you can imagine a message is being passed on from one person to another, to another, to another. It loses its meaning at the end. Now, if I want to know if the word unexpected is understood correctly or not, do you think I can use pilot study by means of questionnaire where I distribute to them? After some time, I collect from them, and from there, I do reliability tests. If the result shows the data are reliable, I assume, they understand. This is what many students here do, okay? Do you know that validity and reliability are different? Data which are reliable may not be valid. Why? Let me give you one example. You pass to me a questionnaire at 5:09, and I want to go now, but you are still talking. You see, the number has dropped. Okay, so in order to get it done, I complete the questionnaire in 3 minutes. This questionnaire requires you to complete in 15 minutes, but you complete in 3 minutes. Everything 5, 5, 5, 5, 4, 4, 5, 5, 4, 4, 5, 5, 5. If you put into a reliability test, the result will tell you reliable, consistent. But this result actually is not valid because I'm not telling you what I really think. I am affected by time, by the way, by the timing you distribute the questionnaire to me. It will seriously affect the validity of the result. Now, if you do your pilot study using this method, how many respondents? According to my seniors, 30. Where do you get that 30 from? Actually, many people don't know. We have the answer, but we have no time to explain to you now. This is why if you want to check if the items are well understood by the respondents, in this particular situation, using pilot study by means of questionnaire may not work. You may have to resort to pre-test by means of interview. Then only you will be able to get feedback from that person. I'm not so sure why you use the word unexpected. This is where you know where the problem is so that you can still revise, modify. This is where adaptation is. In order, you did not change the meaning. You want to make the meaning clearer to them. So eventually, when they do the questionnaire, they understand and they give you the answer to the best of their ability. Okay, so I'm not sure. That's all we can tell you. We can definitely send articles to you, or if UCTS thinks it is necessary, we can always have another session, maybe on pre-test alone, maybe on instrument design alone, maybe on conceptualization, operationalization of measurement items alone. But Jayson and I have the same problem because we are dealing with so many students. Our heart goes out to all of you because we know that there are already traps. When we look at some of your questions, sometimes it's difficult for us to answer because we know if we answer your question directly, that answer may fix the issue in a short while. It will not solve your problem. It will not solve your problem. The understanding is very important. The skills are very important. And I think we have to stop here before we receive any complaints from the students. Okay. Thank you so much for your time. Forgive us if we fail to deliver any points clearly. But Jayson and I, our intention is there. We're happy to be of help. We are still learning, and I hope you don't find our lecture a mere repetition from textbooks. We are actually telling you a lot of situations, and hopefully that would not only address some of your concerns, they will actually motivate you or stimulate you to find more answers in order to do well in your research. My apology if I did not answer the questions. I did not give Jayson to respond to the questions as well. But Jayson, thank you so much. Any final word before we end the session?
No, just a quick one. Enjoy your research and appreciate it. Thanks, everyone. Take
Thank
care.
you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Sorry.
Yes, yes.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I have a question. I have a question about literature review. About literature review part. Okay. Now I want to use like the content of other literature review. Can I use the content? Can I use that content?
I'm not sure what you meant. Basically, when we do research, we have to refer to past literature. We have to refer to past studies. And in your writing, chapter 1, in particular, chapter 2, chapter 3, chapter 4, you have to refer to past studies. So you can cite them, or you can quote them, or you can actually you could actually combine a few ideas together, and therefore in your citation, you actually show a few references. If this is a seminar paper, you can mention that Jayson 2015 argued that, and then you show the citation. So there is no fixed rule. If you read theses, if you read journal articles, you should be able to learn from there how to cite, how to use past literature in your report, in your thesis. Did I answer your question?
Like this situation, like someone he learns about the business model canvas concept, and he writes his understanding about that disease into his literature review, and I want to use his content. Is it okay?
His content is a thesis, a blog, a paper, a journal, a magazine. Where is that content published? You mentioned that you want to use the thing that he wrote, right? So is that a published article?
Online journal article.
Journal article, is it?
Journal article.
Okay, if journal article, of course you can cite, unless that journal is a lousy journal, and your argument is a very strong argument. If you use the content from a lousy journal to support your strong argument, you may be in trouble if the examiners, the reviewers are very particular about it. How to know which journal is lousy is good? That could be another workshop. But you have to read more. You have to read more. Is that the only source you can cite? So you have to be careful about that.
Sorry, can I ask more, one or two more questions?
Okay, go ahead. Jayson, still okay?
Because I'm not clear about this part. Like someone read the example someone read the business business model canvas concept. Like he writes his understanding in literature review, and I want to direct